Other people get reincarnated as a hero or a dragon or the seventh son of a duke with silver hair and a legendary sword. Me? I drowned face first in Yokohama harbor at 2 in the morning. And I woke up on a beach with 3 rabbits the size of dogs charging me. That's the whole opening. No trumpet, no goddess in a white dress, just wet sand, salt in my mouth, and antlers. Let me back up 10 seconds because it's important that you understand exactly how stupid my death was. I'm Naoya Kurusu, 20 years old. I work night shifts at a chain restaurant in Kenai, and my whole personality is I cook well, I watch anime, and I avoid confrontation the way most people avoid open flame. That night, I got off at 1:40, bought a canned coffee, and went to sit on the pier because I couldn't sleep. There was a cat on the edge of the concrete. It slipped. I am the kind of idiot who reaches for a falling cat over open water at 1 in the morning while holding a coffee. The cat landed fine on a ledge I couldn't see. I went straight in. The water in October is cold enough to punch the air out of your lungs. I remember thinking very clearly, this is so embarrassing. And then I remember nothing. And then I remember the rabbits. They have antlers, little forked ones, bone white, and eyes that are far too focused for prey animals. The lead one lowers its head and comes at me across the sand at a speed that no rabbit on earth has any business reaching, and my body does the only thing it knows how to do, which is scream and throw my hands up. And a box appears in the air. Blue letters, floating, in Japanese, thank God. In Japanese, skill, ship summoning, rank, low, summon a registered vessel. YN, I have exactly zero context for any of this. There's a horned rabbit 6 feet away about to open my stomach. So I do what any panicking man does when a glowing menu offers him literally anything. I shout yes. The world thuds. A rowboat drops out of nowhere onto the sand between me and the rabbits. Not a magic boat, not a spectral galleon of the ancestors. A plain, wooden, peeling green rowboat, the exact kind you rent for 800 yen an hour at a park pond, with 2 oars laid across the middle, and a rope coiled in the bow. It lands with a completely mundane whomp. The lead rabbit hits it. I want to be precise here, because it matters for the rest of my life. The rabbit does not bounce off the wood. The rabbit hits nothing, an invisible wall, a hand's width out from the hull, and it doesn't slow down. It reverses. Whatever force it was carrying gets handed back to it double. It goes up and away, tumbling end over end, shrieking, and lands maybe 30 feet down the beach in a spray of sand. The other 2 skid to a stop, sniff the air around the boat, and physically cannot approach. They circle. There's a barrier. There's a dome of nothing around this 800 yen rowboat, and it just threw a killer rabbit into next week. I fall over the gunwale into the boat. I scrape both shins bloody doing it. I don't care. I curl up in the bottom, breathing like a broken accordion, and the rabbits pace the sand snarling, unable to reach me by a single hand's width. I stay in that boat for what has to be an hour, long enough for the shaking to stop, long enough to notice the boat is dry inside even though it's sitting on a wet beach, long enough to poke a finger past the gunwale and feel it pass through empty air, so the barrier only stops things coming in, apparently, or things with intent, or I don't know. I don't know anything. Eventually a second menu blinks up. Patient, waiting, welcome, skill holder, registered vessel, rowboat, pond type, berths, 2. Vessel properties, all summoned vessels, unsinkable, indestructible, no boarding without owner's permission, no hostile effect functions upon the deck. And then below that, in slightly smaller text, like a footnote someone was embarrassed to write, skill classification, per divine registry, refuse, garbage tier. I read garbage tier 4 times. I just watched a rabbit get deleted by physics, and the gods whoever wrote this had looked at it and gone, garbage. I'd learn later exactly how that happened. But at that moment, I just sat in my little boat, on an alien beach, under a sky with too many stars and a moon that was slightly the wrong shape, and I started laughing. Then I started crying, then both at once, which is a very undignified sound, and the rabbits stared at me like I was the strange one. I don't die that first night, which is honestly the whole achievement. The rabbits give up around dawn. I climb out on legs that don't work right and walk inland, because the beach has no water I can drink. And I'd already figured out drinking seawater kills you back on Earth, and I have no reason to think this world respects that rule any less. I find a road, a real cart-rutted dirt road, and I follow it. And by midday, I reach a town. It's a fantasy town. Timber and plaster and a stone gate. People with pointed ears, people with tails, a man with small curved horns hauling a barrel. Nobody screams at the sight of me, which means humans exist here and I'm not obviously a monster. A guard at the gate looks me over soaked clothes, park rental posture, no weapon, and asks me something in a language I don't speak, except I do. It slides into place a half-second late, like subtitles catching up. Some translation grace, part of the whole reincarnation package I never agreed to. He's asking my business and my papers. I have no papers, I have no money. I have wet jeans and a hoodie with a restaurant logo on it and a skill the gods filed under garbage. I tell him I'm a traveler who was robbed, which is the first lie I ever tell in this world, and it's a bad one. But the guard has heard worse and waves me through with a warning that vagrants get moved along. The town is called Umezato. It smells like bread and horse and low tide. My stomach, which has been silent through terror, chooses this moment to remind me I have not eaten since a convenience store rice ball roughly one death ago. And I have nothing in an entire other universe with no ID, no bank, no language. I learned honestly, I am for the first time in my life, genuinely, immediately going to starve. I do the thing I'm good at, which is not fighting and not negotiating, but watching. I sit against a wall near the market for an hour and I learn. The coins here are copper, silver, platinum, and something they call platinum gold that nobody at this market has ever seen. A loaf costs 2 copper. A silver is a lot of copper. There's a building with a crossed sword sign, and people going in and out with weapons and pouches the Adventurers Guild. And there's a lot of horned rabbit on offer at the butcher's, sold cheap, because apparently the things breed like a plague and everyone hates hunting them because they gore you. I hate them too. I have the shin scabs to prove it. But I now know something the whole town doesn't. I can hunt them at 0 risk from inside a park boat. The problem is getting registered. You need money to register, or at least that's how these things always work, and I have exactly none. Here's where I meet the second person in this world who matters, and it's a girl about my age at a moneylender's stall. A beastkin, fox ears, bored expression, filing her nails with a knife. I'll learn her name much later, and she'll turn out to be someone important. Right now, she's just the one stall willing to look at me twice. I ask in my terrible honest way if there's any way to borrow enough to register at the guild, and I brace for a laugh. She looks at my hands. Not my face, my hands cooks calluses, she says, and a burn scar shaped like a pan lip. You worked a kitchen. She's not wrong. I have a permanent shine on my right forearm from a decade of oven doors. People with a trade don't skip town. 1 silver at guild rate. You default, I own your labor fare. I have no idea if it's fair. It sounds terrifying, but I take it. Because the alternative is starving in an alley, and she counts a single silver coin into my palm like she's doing me a personal favor, which she is. I register at the guild that afternoon. It costs most of the silver. They hand me a wooden card, rank F, the bottom, the mud, and ask what my skill is. For the record, I say summoning, and leave it vague, because garbage tier isn't the sort of thing you announce. And I've already decided sitting in that boat at dawn that the less anyone knows about how my skill actually works, the safer I'll be. First smart decision of my new life. Won't be my last, but there won't be many. I take a rabbit hunting quest off the board. Bounty 3. Copper a pair of ears. No upper limit. As many as you can bring. Cull encouraged. The clerk warns me the things are dangerous for a lone F rank with no weapon. I nod like I take that seriously. I go back to the beach at dusk. It's the only place I know the boat works. And honestly, I don't yet know it works anywhere. I stand on the sand and feeling profoundly stupid, I dismiss the boat a thought, a mental away, and it winks out of existence and summon it again. And it whumps back onto the sand, dry exactly as it was, so I can carry it. In my head. A boat in my head. Then I find a stick. I don't even have the oar situation figured out yet. I use a piece of driftwood, and I go rabbit hunting. The dumbest way anyone has ever hunted anything. I sit in the boat, on the sand, in the middle of a field where the horned rabbits graze at dusk, near the tree line. And I wait. They come. Of course they come. They're territorial, and I'm in their field. The first one charges the boat, hits the barrier, and gets thrown back stunned onto the grass, dazed, legs kicking. And I lean over the gunwale carefully, staying inside, always staying inside, and I brain it with the driftwood. It works. It works horribly well. The barrier doesn't stop me reaching out. It only stops things coming in with force. So I'm a man in an invulnerable bunker with a stick, and the rabbits keep throwing themselves at the walls of my bunker and knocking themselves silly, and I keep leaning out and clubbing them, and I feel like the worst, most cowardly, most efficient monster hunter in the history of any world. By full dark, I have 11 rabbits. Real dead, dog-sized horned rabbits. I cut the ears with my borrowed knife. I gag. I'm a cook, not a hunter, but I do it, and I keep the meat, because I'm not leaving good meat on a field. I don't have a way to carry it. Then the menu blinks helpfully. Vessel storage available. Contents held in stasis. Time does not pass within. There's a locker under the rowboat's stern seat that was not there this morning. I open it, and it's bigger inside than out, cold, dry still. I load the meat. It'll keep. Of course it'll keep. Nothing in this boat obeys the rules it should. I hike back to town with a boat in my head and my pockets full of ears, and I hand 11 pairs to the night clerk at the guild, and she looks at the pile and looks at me, F rank. No weapon, soaked jeans, and asks how. Trap, I say. Second lie, better than the first. She pays me 33 copper. It is the first money I have ever earned by myself in a world where I have no history, and I am so happy I nearly cry on the counter, which she pretends not to see. I eat God. I eat bread and stew and a mug of something bitter, and it costs 8 copper, and I have never in either life tasted anything so good. Then I do something no other adventurer in Yumisato does with their kill, because I'm not an adventurer, I'm a cook. I take a rabbit haunch from my locker, I borrow the inn's fire for a copper, and I cook it right pounded, salted, seared hard, rested, the way you'd never bother for gore meat everyone thinks tastes like mud. The innkeeper smells it. His wife smells it. They ask what cut it is. It's the same rabbit they can't sell. It just wasn't ruined by someone who hated it. That's the moment if I'm honest. That decides everything. Not the barrier. The haunch. I go out the next night, and the next. Driftwood becomes a proper ore. I buy for 2 copper because it's longer, and I can reach farther out. 11 rabbits becomes 20, becomes 30. I pay the fox girl back her silver on the third day, and she raises an eyebrow like a man paying a debt. Early is a rarer beast than a horned rabbit. I keep the best meat, sell ears for bounty, and start selling cooked rabbit properly cooked. My rabbit to the inn, then to a second inn, then to a stall. What I don't notice, what I am genuinely too tired and too relieved to notice, is the thing happening around me in the market. Horned rabbit was a nuisance crop. Nobody wanted to risk hunting. Now some idiot F-rank is bringing in 40 a night, alone, unharmed, and dumping cheap meat on the town. The butcher's price drops. The inns, suddenly able to buy protein at a copper a portion, put meat back on the cheap menu. The rookie adventurers who used to skip meals and get killed hungry, eat full and buy a second dagger and stop dying so much. A ripple. A small, stupid, delicious ripple from one coward in a park boat with an oar. I sit in my rowboat at the edge of the dusk field on maybe the 6th night. 30 rabbits in stasis under the seat. My oar across my knees. Eating a piece of my own seared haunch off the tip of the knife. Watching another rabbit knock itself cold against the wall of my invulnerable 800-yen bunker. The gods called this garbage. The gods labeled it refuse and moved on to watch someone with a silver-haired swordsman. Garbage tier, I say out loud, to no one, mouth full, and I start laughing again, and this time I don't cry. I have no idea a god is already bored enough to be watching. I have no idea about the liner or the elves, or the prince who'll knock his head on a pier. I have no idea I've just started on accident, the collapse of the local rabbit market. I just reach out with the oar and hit another one. Here's my life 2 weeks after I drowned. I own a park rowboat, an oar, 30-odd copper on a good day, and a rabbit-killing rhythm. So shameless, I've stopped feeling bad about it. Sit in the boat, wait for the rabbit to knock itself stupid on the barrier, lean out, whack it with the oar, never leaving the deck. Cut the ears. Keep the meat in the stasis locker where time doesn't pass. Go to town. Sell ears for bounty. Sell meat cooked to whoever's hungry. Sleep at the cheapest inn. Do it again. It is the least heroic loop imaginable, and it is working. And that's the part nobody warned me about. That a garbage skill in the hands of a coward who can cook turns into a small, ugly, unstoppable money machine. I've settled into a spot I like. A meadow a half hour out. Backed against a stream where I can drink and wash the knife, with a stand of trees the rabbits like to graze near at dusk and dawn. Twice a day is the trick. They're most active then, and I've learned to summon the boat right in the middle of their grazing line so they charge on instinct and brain themselves before they think better of it. I keep a tally scratched on the stern seat. Best night, 41. Worst, 9. When it rained, and I sat in a dry boat in a wet field feeling like the loneliest man in 2 worlds. I've also learned to hate the smell of rabbit ear, which is a thing I never thought I'd have to have an opinion about. The money's real though, small, but real. 3 copper, a pair of ears at the guild, no cap, and I bring in 20-30 pairs. Cooked meat sells better than raw, a copper a portion, sometimes 2. And I've got a standing thing now with the innkeeper at the salt kettle, a man named Bosk who calls me boat cook, and pretends he hasn't figured out. I'm the reason his rabbit menu tripled. I keep the best cuts back for myself and eat like a king off meat. Everyone else thinks tastes like mud. Because here's the thing they never understood about horned rabbit. It's not bad meat. It's just gore tough and worked hard and full of the taste of a scared animal that died badly. If you catch it clean and the barrier always kills it clean, 1 stun and 1 tap and you bleed it and rest it. And don't panic cook it over a screaming fire because you're afraid of the antlers. It's good. Lean, a little like venison, takes salt and fire beautifully. I braise the tough bits low and slow in the stasis locker overnight. Well, overnight. Time doesn't pass in there, so really I braise it in a pot over the inn fire, and then hold it in stasis so it never overcooks and never spoils. I've got a rotation of about a dozen finished portions ready at any moment. It's the closest thing to a functioning restaurant I've had since I died, and it fits in a box under a boat seat. I clear my headcount debt to nobody. I don't owe anyone anymore. The Fox Girl's silver went back on day 3, and for the first time I have a small buried surplus. 11 copper, then 20. Then, on the good week, over 40 and change, which in Yumizato is not poverty. It's not wealth either, but it's the first floor I've stood on that didn't feel like it was about to drop out from under me. The slime finds me on the 16th day. I'm at the stream after dusk, rinsing the knife, boat summoned on the bank behind me, when I see it in the shallows. Most slimes here, I've learned from listening at the guild, are a dull green nuisance the color of pond scum F rank. Harmless unless you fall asleep in one, cleared for a copper a bucket. This one's not green, it's pale, almost pearl, and where it moves through the water goes clear. Not stirred up clear. Clean. A ribbon of clean water trailing behind it in the murk. I'm a coward. I want to leave it alone. But I'm also, God help me, curious, and I've got a boat that nothing can hurt me in, so I climb back aboard. Lean over the gunwale and watch it. It comes to me. It doesn't attack, it can't board. The barrier sees to that, but it presses up against the outside of the barrier. And instead of getting flung away like a rabbit, it just rests there, pulsing, gentle, no force, no intent to harm. The barrier lets it stay. A menu blinks up, which is new. I didn't know the boat did this. Creature detected. Sacred slime. Rank. Extremely rare. No hostility. Tame attempt available? UIN. Sacred it says. Not the pond scum kind. I say yes because I say yes to everything. That's my entire strategy. And there's a soft chime and the thing flows up over the gunwale allowed in. Now, because I've made it mine and settles in the bottom of my boat like a puddle of pearl jelly, and I get familiar acquired. Sacred slime. Granted, host, purification magic minor, cleans water, food, wounds, cloth, cannot harm. I sit there staring at it. I now have a pet. In my rowboat. A pet that came with the ability to purify things. I tested on the stream water, dip a cup, focus the way the little tutorial feel in my head suggests, and the faint silt and the tannin brown of the water just lifts out, leaving it clean as anything I ever drank on Earth. Which matters enormously, because I've been boiling every drop I drink for 2 weeks and worrying about the days I didn't boil it long enough. Now I don't have to. I can drink from any stream. I can wash the rabbit meat clean of the field before I cook it, which means less risk of the runs, which means I'm getting ahead of myself, but I already see it. I can cook cleaner than any kitchen in Umezato that draws its water from a town well full of horse. I named the slime Tamamo because it's pale and sacred and looks like a foxfire spirit from a game I loved, and because I've been alone in a boat for 16 days and naming things is what you do to not lose it. Tamamo, it turns out, has exactly one strong opinion in life, which is that it prefers to sit somewhere warm and dry and soft and be carried. It refuses absolutely to travel on the wet bottom of the boat if there's a folded blanket available. Within a day, I'm rowing with a slime perched on a cushion on the stern seat like a small pearlescent lord surveying its lands. I feed it a scrap of rabbit, and it goes translucent with joy and cleans the grease off my hands afterward for free. Best deal I've made yet. Better than the silver. The second thing I figure out that week is how the skill grows, and it's not what I'd have bet on. I keep waiting to level up from killing things. That's how every game I ever played works. You fight, you gain experience, the number goes up. So I'm keeping a mental tally, expecting some ping after the 100th rabbit. Nothing. 200 rabbits, nothing. Then, flush from a good stretch of selling, I do something on a whim. There's a boat for sale at the little river dock in Umezato, not a rowboat, an actual small motorboat, or what passes for one here. A slim lacquered thing with a mana-driven paddle screw at the stern that the previous owner used for river fishing before he took ill. It's beautiful, it's absurdly beyond me. It costs 4 silver, which is nearly everything I've scraped together, and I stand looking at it for an embarrassing amount of time before I ask the seller, an old man wrapped in a blanket, whether it works. He says it does. That the mana core's sound, and I don't need mana of my own to run it, just to feed the core copper dust the way you'd oil a hinge. I hand over 4 silver, 4 whole silver. It hurts. I feel it in my teeth, and the boat is mine. And the menu chimes. Vessel registered, river runner, skiff type, berths, 4, ship summoning level up, rank F to rank E, new capacity, 2 registered vessels may be held, stasis storage expanded. There it is. I don't level by killing, I level by buying ships. The skill grows with the fleet. Every vessel I purchase and register makes the skill stronger, unlocks more room, more berths, more storage. I sit down hard on the dock, because that reframes everything. It means the path forward isn't fighting. I can't fight. I've established that. I flinch at a rabbit. The path forward is money, and money means trade. And every coin I earn goes toward the next bigger, better boat, which makes the skill stronger, which lets me earn more, which buys a bigger boat. It's a loop. It's the same rabbit loop, just scaled up and pointed at something. And now I can summon either boat, hold both in my head, keep the rowboat as my invulnerable rabbit bunker, and take the skiff, my beautiful, mana-driven 4-berth skiff, out onto the river to fish, where nothing that lives in that river can sink it, ram it, or come aboard without my say-so. The old man watches me grin like a fool and says, mildly, that it's a good little boat, but I'll want to be careful on the river. There's a rapid stretch downstream that's drowned better sailors than me. I think about the word unsinkable, and I think about indestructible, and I say, I'll be fine. And it's the most confident sentence I've said since I got here. I take the skiff out the next morning, Tamamo on the stern cushion, the rowboat tucked away in my head where I keep it now like a spare tire. I feed the manacore its pinch of copper dust and the paddle screw hums, and we go upstream first, gently learning the boat. Then I let us drift down toward the rapids the old man warned about, because I want to test the one thing I haven't dared test. Whether indestructible and unsinkable, hold against something that isn't a rabbit. The current picks up. The river narrows between 2 shoulders of gray rock, and the water goes white and loud, standing waves and a drop I can hear before I see it. Every instinct I own screams to grab the bank. I don't. I sit down in the bottom of the skiff, hug the mast post, put Tamamo inside my hoodie where it goes very still and very small, and I let the river take us into the throat of it. We drop, the skiff should flip, it should swamp on Earth. This is how I died once already, in reverse. Instead, the boat hits the base of the drop and doesn't care. No water comes over the gunwale, the barrier, I realize, holds the deck dry, hostile force can't function on it, and apparently a wall of white water counts as hostile force. We punch through the standing waves like they're painted on. A rock the size of a cart looms up and the skiff kisses it and the rock loses. We glance off untouched, not a scratch on the lacquer. I'm screaming. Tamamo is a nervous puddle inside my shirt. We shoot out the bottom of the rapids into flat water, spinning gently, completely fine, and I'm alive, and dry, and laughing that ugly boat laugh again. The old man drowned better sailors than me in that stretch. He didn't have a Japanese pond rental boat that the gods called garbage. I fish the flat water below the rapids, and I catch things I have no names for: a fat silver river fish that fights the line hard. A flat bottom feeder tamamo cleans of its mud taste before I even ask. I keep 3 of the good ones in stasis. I could feed 6 people off one afternoon on this river, and nobody else can fish this stretch because nobody else survives the rapids to reach it, which is the pattern of my entire life now. I'm starting to understand. Everyone else is competing for the safe, crowded, contested places. I go to the one place that would kill them, sit inside a wall nothing can cross, and take everything. I spend that evening at the salt kettle, and something's changed, and it takes me a while to place it. There are more people, younger adventurers mostly, F and E rank, the kind who a month ago would have been nursing one drink and skipping supper because they were saving for gear or funeral money. They're eating full plates, rabbit. My rabbit. Cheap now and river fish, and they've got new boots. One of them's got a shield that isn't secondhand. Bosk leans over the counter while I'm eating and says low that the guild noticed the rookie survival numbers are up this quarter. Fewer dead first years than any season he can remember. He looks at me when he says it, not accusing. Just looking. Cheap meat means a fed rookie, he says. Fed rookie doesn't faint in a fight. Doesn't take the desperate quest because he's got rent. You dumped a mountain of protein on this town, boat cook. Whole market's still finding its feet. He wipes a mug. Butcher's furious. Says the rabbit price hasn't been this low in 20 years. Says some fool's flooding it. Beat. You know anything about that? No idea, I say. Getting better at lying. Not proud of it. He snorts and refills my mug for free, which is its own kind of answer. I walk back to the river dock in the dark with a slime asleep in my hoodie and 2 boats in my head. And I do the arithmetic that's become my nightly prayer. 40-some copper a good day, plus cooked meat markup, plus now river fish nobody else can reach. Skiff bought, skill leveled, storage doubled. I've broken even on the 4 silver and then some. If I keep this up, in a month I could afford, what, a bigger boat? A real cargo vessel? I don't even know what's out there yet. I just know the loop points up, and up is the direction I've decided to go. One Wimgod's garbage skill at a time. I sit on the dock edge, feet over the black water that killed me once and can't touch me now, and I let myself think for exactly 1 minute that I might actually be alright here. Then the town temple bell rings the hour, and I don't know it yet, but up in a place I can't see, on a throne I'll come to hate, a bored god watching a viewing crystal like it's a soap opera, has just noticed that his garbage skill went to a boy who used it to sell rabbit, and has decided that's the funniest and most disappointing thing he's seen all year. He's going to want a word. They come for me at the temple and I go. Because when a woman in gold robes tells you the gods request your presence, and every person in the market goes quiet and stares, you don't say, actually, I'm busy selling rabbit. I've been to the Umezato temple exactly 0 times in 3 weeks. It's a stone building near the square with a bell that rings the hours, and I'd assumed it was decorative, the kind of thing you have in a fantasy town for atmosphere. Turns out the gods here are extremely real and extremely nosy, and they watch mortals through some kind of viewing crystal, the way I used to watch anime. I'm about to learn I've been on someone's screen. The priestess leads me past the public hall into a back chamber with a mirror-smooth pool in the floor and tells me to kneel at the edge and to keep Tamamo out of it because the sacred water is sensitive. I put Tamamo in my hoodie. The slime, sensing something, goes very small and very still. Good instincts. The water lights up. And then I'm not looking at water. I'm looking through it, up, into a place that is all white marble and gold and too much light. And on a throne in the middle of it is a god. I know he's a god because the priestess presses her forehead to the floor and stays there. I know something's wrong with him because he's slouched sideways on the throne with one leg over the armrest, and he's got a chin like a spoiled prince, and an expression like a kid who's been made to come inside from playing. He's beautiful in the way that's exhausting. He's also unmistakably pouting. There he is. The god says. His voice comes from everywhere. The rabbit boy. I say, hello, hello. He mimics me, sitting up. Do you have any idea, he says, how boring you are? I do not have a good answer to this. He introduces himself grandly as Amano Takumi, god of creation, maker of skills, and then he launches into what is unmistakably a rant that has been building for a while. I gave you, he says, jabbing a finger, one of the finest skills in my catalog, ship summoning. Do you understand what I gave you? Vessels that cannot sink, cannot break, cannot be boarded, on which no hostile force functions. Kings have died for less. Empires have been built on less. And you, he leans forward, and the light flares like he's genuinely offended you use it to kill rabbits with a stick. The rabbits were dangerous. I say, which is true and which is apparently the wrong thing to say, because he throws himself back against the throne and groans at the ceiling. The other gods are laughing at him, he tells me. All of them. He gave the legendary sea skill to a coward who sits in a pond boat and clubs vermin, and now the goddess of the harvest calls him the god who wasted a masterpiece, and the war god won't stop bringing it up at council. And it's humiliating. He classified my skill garbage tier in the registry mostly. I'm gathering, out of spite, to get ahead of the joke, and it backfired, because now everyone thinks he made garbage. I want to point out that this is entirely his own doing and none of it is my problem. I don't, because I'm a coward and he's a god, and he's clearly capable of doing something horrible to me on a whim, so I kneel there and take it. And then he changes tack. And this is the part that reels me in. Because he's not stupid, this bored man-child. He's watched me for 2 weeks. He knows exactly what I am. You don't want power, he says, suddenly quiet, studying me the way Bosk studies a mug. I've watched 1,000 of you. They all want the same things: strength, revenge, a crown, a woman, a name that outlives them. You want none of it. He tilts his head. You want to go home? You can't. So you want the next thing. You want, and he waves a hand, and the pool image shifts, and I'm looking at rice, a steaming bowl of white rice. Short grain, glossy, the kind you get from a proper cooker, with a little bump in the top where the paddle lifted it. Then it's a bowl of ramen, real ramen, chashu and a soft egg and a curl of steam. Then a bottle of soy sauce, a specific brand, my brand, the one from my mother's kitchen. Then a screen, a bright screen, and I recognize the opening frames of a film I've watched 40 times. I make a sound I'm not proud of. There it is, Amino Takumi says. And he's got me, and he knows he's got me. Your world, the food, the stories, all of it, I can put it in a shop. My shop. I stock what I like from 100,000 worlds, and I could stock yours. Rice, boy, soy sauce, films that never end. He lets it hang there, glistening in the water. But I don't give handouts to men who embarrass me. What do? I say. My voice comes out wrong. To get it. He smiles, and it's an awful smile. The smile of someone who's been waiting for exactly this question. Prove the skill isn't garbage, he says. Make me look brilliant instead of stupid. Build something worth watching, and when you can afford it. The image shifts one last time, and now it's a ship, but not a rowboat, not a skiff. It's a liner. White, vast, 5 decks tall, gleaming, with lit windows and a promenade and smokestacks. The kind of ship that carries thousands. The Homeworld shop unlocks aboard this. A luxury liner, 500 platinum. He says the number like a guillotine. Buy that ship, register it, and you can walk down to its galley and cook rice for the rest of your life. 500 platinum. I have at this moment 4 silver and change. There are 100 copper to a silver, and I've learned this by now, 100 silver to a platinum, which means a platinum is 10,000 copper, and 500 platinum is 5 million copper. And I earn maybe 40 copper on a good day clubbing rabbits. The number is so enormous it loops back around into something almost calming. It's not a debt. It's a horizon. It's the thing you point the boat at. Okay, I hear myself say. The god blinks. He expected me to despair. Okay, I say again. Rice, 500 platinum. I'll do it. There's a long pause. Then Amino Takumi starts laughing, real laughing. Delighted, a child who's just been handed a new toy, and he tells the priestess to send me on my way. And just before the pool goes dark, he leans in close and says, almost fondly, "You are so much more interesting when you're hungry." I walk out of that temple, a man with a mission and a slime in his hoodie and 4 silver to his name. And for the first time since I drowned, I have a direction that isn't just survive until tomorrow. It's rice. It's the dumbest, most human, most me thing to build an empire on, and I don't care. I don't stay in Umezato. That's the first big decision, because the god was right about one thing. The loop points up, and up isn't in a little river town where I've already crashed the rabbit market, and the butcher wants my head. Up is downriver, toward the sea, toward the big cities and the big money. Bosk tells me, when I ask where a man goes to actually trade, that the river runs south to the coast and the big southern merchant city of Sionagi, where the guild is a real guild, and a man with a good boat can move cargo for real coin. 12 days by river cart, he says. Faster by boat, if you're mad enough to take the skiff through the rapids and the lower gorges. I'm exactly that mad. I have an unsinkable boat. I buy provisions, dried meat, hard bread, a water skin I no longer strictly need because Tamamo cleans any water I want, and I settle up with everyone I owe good feeling to, which is mostly Bosk. I leave the meadow, the stream, the rabbit spot. I'll miss the rabbit spot in a way that surprises me. It was where I learned I could live here. Then I take the skiff south, Tamamo on the stern cushion, the rowboat tucked in my head as a spare, and I let the river run me toward the sea and the money and the far-off white ship full of rice. 4 days downriver, past 2 more rapids that the barrier eats without noticing. I come around a bend into a wide, slow stretch, and I see people on the bank waving me down. 5 of them camped by the water, gear laid out. One of them standing at the very edge flagging me with both arms. Adventurers, you can tell by the mismatch of good weapons and hard eyes. There's a woman in front, tall, a sword on her back, and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed, and behind her a lean one reading me before I've even beached, and a mage-looking girl, and a big man the size of a door, and a 5th, so still I almost miss her in the trees. I nearly keep going. Every instinct says, strangers, don't stop, you're a coward, remember. But the tall one calls across the water polite, direct that they're not bandits. They're the party Higanbana, out of the south, and their boat cracked a strake on a rock 2 days back, and they're stuck. They'll pay for passage or a tow. They've got coin. I ease the skiff in, but I don't beach it. I keep it a length off the bank in the water where the barrier's between us, and I talk to them from the deck. Coward's habit. It'll save my life more than once. The tall one's name is Ayame Todoroki, and she leads the party, and she's A rank, which I don't yet fully understand the weight of, but which makes the lean one Chizuru say the rank quietly like it should impress me. It does a little. 5 copper, says the mage. Big man says nothing, just looks at my provisions with an intensity that borders on the criminal, but I don't take them south, because here's what I know that they don't. I came through the lower gorge, and I heard things at the last riverside village. There's a bandit crew working the stretch below here. They've been taking cargo boats, where the river narrows and there's nowhere to run. A cracked boat party of 5, half of them tired, low on supplies, drifting down river, looking for a tow that's exactly the meal those bandits are waiting for. So I tell them. I don't offer to fight the bandits' god. No, I just tell them, there's a crew below the second narrows. They hit boats at the choke. Don't run the river tired. Take the ridge trail on foot and rejoin the water past the village where there are guards. Ayame's eyes narrow. Chizuru, the lean one, watches my face the whole time I say it and then gives Ayame a small nod, like he's not lying. Reads people. That one. I'll remember that later when I need someone who can smell a trap. They ask how I know. I say I came through it, and they should be careful. And because a coward's kindness is still kindness, I hand across from the deck 6 portions of cooked rabbit and river fish out of my stasis locker, still hot, because I have plenty. And they're clearly running low. The big man makes a sound like a wounded animal at the smell. Ayame takes the food and looks at it, and looks at me, and asks my name. I tell her just Naoya, no house, no rank worth mentioning. She says Higanbana pays its debts, and if our paths cross south, I've got friends. Then she asks, almost as an afterthought, whether I'll come with them, take the safe trail, travel together. I say no. I've got somewhere to be and a boat that doesn't care about bandits. And then, because I can feel Chizuru still reading me and I don't want anyone to work out how my boat actually works, I push off, feed the manicore, and go upstream a little, deliberately letting them think I'm doubling back, before cutting the loop and taking the south channel out of their sight. Plant the seed. Vanish. I don't know why I do it that carefully. I just know that the less anyone understands about the man in the unsinkable boat, the safer the man in the unsinkable boat stays. The last thing I see is the big man eating a piece of rabbit with both hands, and Ayame watching my wake with an expression I can't read. 8 more days on the river and I reach Shionagi, and it's the first thing in this world that stops me flat. Umizato was a town. Shinagi is a city, a proper southern merchant port, white stone and red tile climbing up from a harbor so full of ships I can't count the masts. Sea ships, real ones, tall-sided cargo haulers and lean coastal runners, and things with 3 masts that make my beautiful skiff look like the toy it is. The harbor smells of tar and spice and fish and money. So much money. The specific smell of a place where fortunes move. I sit in the skiff at the mouth of the harbor for a full minute, just looking at it. Tamamo pulsing on my shoulder, and I think, this is where the loop gets big. I tie up at a public dock, pay the mooring copper, and go find the Merchant Guild, a great pillared hall 3 times the size of Umizato's whole square, and I sign my name and my rank F card into the registry as an independent trader with 1 river skiff. The clerk barely looks up, one more nobody with 1 small boat, in a city of thousands of boats. But I've got a slime that purifies water, a skill that levels by buying ships, a horizon 500 platinum away, and a growing suspicion that the reason nobody's built what I'm about to build is that nobody else has a boat that can't be sunk, broken, or boarded. Somewhere far above, a board god settles in with his crystal to watch the rabbit boy in the big city, and this time he's actually leaning forward. The fox girl finds me in Shionagi, which turns out to be a small world, the same bored expression, the same fox ears, the same knife she uses for filing her nails, except now she's not at a moneylender's stall in a river town. She's a fixer for the Southern Merchant Guild, and she's the one they send when a nobody with 1 boat wanders in looking useful. Her name is Koyori Suzuna, and she remembers me. The cook who paid his silver early, she says, dropping onto the bench across from me in the guild's public hall. Rare enough that I asked around. You made the whole Umizato rabbit market fall over. Butcher, they're still crying about it. She props her chin on her hand. So what's a market breaker doing in my city with a river toy? I tell her the truth mostly, which is my whole strategy. I want to trade. I have a very good boat, and I need to know where the money is. She studies me the way everyone in this world studies me, like there's a joke I'm not in on yet. Then she leans in and tells me about the island. There's a resort island, she says. 3 days south along the coast, past a shoal run everyone calls the Comb. Warm springs, white sand, the kind of place southern nobles and rich merchants would pay a fortune to summer at. Except almost nobody can reach it. The Comb is a maze of reefs and cross-currents that eats hulls. Right now in the whole southern region, exactly 4 ships have the shallow draft, the pilot, and the sheer luck to run the Comb reliably. 4. And they charge like it. Passage to the island is a luxury priced like a jewel, and the 4 captains who can make the run have carved up the trade between them and keep it small on purpose, because scarcity is the whole business. 4 ships, Koyori says, watching my face, so the trade stays tiny and rich. Anybody with a 5th hull that could run the Comb reliable would print money. She spreads her hands. But there is no 5th hull. The Comb doesn't care how good your pilot is. 1 bad current and you're on the teeth. I think about the word indestructible. I think about the rapids that couldn't scratch the skiff, the rock the size of a cart that lost. A reef is just a rock that sits still and waits. How much to run the Comb? I ask if you could. She names a number that makes me put my mug down. Per crossing, per passenger, on top of that. I don't tell her about the barrier. I've learned that lesson. I just ask her to introduce me to the island's factor, whoever handles arrivals, and to take a cut for the introduction, because I've decided I want Koyori Suzuna on my side, permanently. And the way you buy loyalty from a mercenary is you feed the mercenary. She agrees to a percentage that's steep and fair, and I can see her recalculating me behind those fox eyes, moving me up some private ledger from nobody with a toy to watch this one. I run the comb the next morning, and it's the rapids all over again, except the rapids didn't try to kill me for 2 straight hours. The reefs are exactly as advertised, black teeth just under a turquoise surface, currents that grab the skiff sideways and shove it toward the rocks with real malice. Any normal boat would be splinters in the first 10 minutes. I feed the Manicore copper dust. I point the bow roughly south, and I let the barrier do what the barrier does. We graze a reef that should gut us, and glance off untouched. A cross-current slams us broadside into a wall of coral, and the coral gives, not the boat. Tamamo hides in my hoodie for the whole crossing, a nervous little knot of jelly, and I white-knuckle the tiller and scream a bit. But we come out the far side of the comb into a calm lagoon, dry, whole, not a scratch on the lacquer, and there's the island. It's beautiful, genuinely. White crescent beach, green hills behind, steam rising in one spot where the hot springs are. There's a small factor's post on the beach, and a jetty and maybe 40 people, the 4 privileged ships, worth of guests and staff. That's the whole population of the place, kept small and exclusive by the comb. The factor, a nervous man named Todo, watches me beach a river skiff on the resort island, through the comb, and he looks like he's seeing a ghost. He asks, how? I say I have a special boat, which is what I say to everyone now, and it's not even a lie. And the beauty of it is nobody can prove otherwise. He asks if I'll bring guests. I say yes. He asks the price, and I say Koyori will handle it, and I watch his face when he hears the guild fixer's name, and I've just gone from impossible ghost to the 5th ship in about 90 seconds. I become, that week, the indispensable ferryman. It's the rabbit loop again, scaled up past anything I imagined in Yumizato. I run guests through the comb 4 at a time, the skiff's berths, and I charge the comb price, and the 4 established captains hate me, and there is nothing they can do about it, because I'm not competing on skill. I'm competing on a boat that physically cannot be wrecked. I don't undercut them much. Koyori advises me not to. Keep the price high, she says. You're not the cheap option. You're the reliable one, the one that always makes the crossing when the sea's too rough for the others. When a storm rolls the comb and the 4 real ships sit in port, I run it anyway, and I can charge triple, and I do. Within a week, I've earned more than I made in 3 weeks of rabbits. Real silver, stacks of it, and the first platinum coin I've ever held, 1 whole platinum, cold and heavy, which I stare at that night on the beach like it's the moon, because 500 of these is a white ship full of rice, and I now hold 1. I buy nothing yet. I bank it with the guild under Koyori's arrangement. The horizon's a long way off, and I've learned to hoard. The problem with being the indispensable ferryman is the waiting. The island's rhythm is a 5-day cycle. Guests come for 5-day stays. So between runs, I've got dead time on the beach with nothing to ferry, and I'm a cook. I cannot sit still with dead time in a beach in a stasis locker full of good fish. So I do the thing I always do, which is build something because I'm bored and lonely, and it's how I keep my head straight. I take the rowboat, my old garbage rowboat, the pond rental, still tucked in my head, and I summon it, and I lash timber across it, and the skiff to make a broad, flat platform. A raft, stable and wide. On it, I build a gazebo out of driftwood and cheap canvas from the factor's post. And under the gazebo, I build the thing I've been missing more than rice. Almost a bath. A wooden bath. A proper Japanese soaking tub. Waist deep. Built from planed island wood. Fed by a trough, I run from the hot spring up the hill down to the raft. Tamamo purifies the water so it's clean as anything I ever soaked in on earth. Clear and mineral and hot. I build a little firebox to keep it hot when the spring flow cools, and a screen for modesty, and a shelf for a cup. And I sit in it that first evening with a cup of the local pear wine, and Tamamo floating happily beside me like a pearl in the bath. And I feel, for 1 whole hour, like a person again. I don't build it to sell. I build it because I'm homesick. But nothing in this world stays private for me for long. Higanbana arrives on the 11th day, and they arrive owing me a debt they never got to pay. They come across on one of the 4 real ships, Ayame at the rail, Chizuru beside her, and the other 3, the mage, the big man, the still one from the trees. Ayame spots me on the beach and her whole face changes, and she comes down the jetty fast and says my name like an accusation and a thank you at once. The bandit crew below the second narrows. She tells me it was exactly where I said, exactly the choke I described, and they took the ridge trail on my word. And 2 nights later, they heard those same bandits had gutted a cargo boat that did run the narrows tired. If they'd been on the river, low and slow with a cracked hull, that's them dead. Chizuru says it plainly. You saved the party. We don't forget that. And Ayame says Higanbana pays its debts and asks what she owes me. I say nothing. I mean it. It cost me 6 portions of rabbit and a warning. But Ayame Todoroki is not a woman who accepts nothing. So I do the only thing I know how to do to make her sit down and stop trying to give me money. I cook for them. It's a nothing meal. Honestly, I've been running guests, not restocking. So my stasis locker is low. I've got some fish, some chicken I bought on the mainland for myself, mostly bones and offcuts, and some of the seaweed that grows thick in the island's lagoon. On Earth, this is a broke week meal. The thing you make when payday's Friday and it's Tuesday and you've got a fridge full of scraps. I take the chicken bones and roast them dark, and I simmer them slow with the seaweed for the sea sweetness, and I skim it and clarify it and salt it exactly right, and I pull the last threads of meat off the bones into it, and I serve 5 bowls of a clear golden broth, that cost me almost nothing and tastes like something you'd wait an hour in the cold for back home. The big man, his name is Kagari, and he is, I will learn, a bottomless pit that makes a sound when he tastes it that I can only describe as spiritual. He asks for a second bowl before he's finished the first. The mage, Nanami, cheeky and sharp, demands to know what noble kitchen I trained in, and doesn't believe me when I say a chain restaurant in a place you've never heard of. The still one, Yuzuha, doesn't say a word. She just holds her bowl in both hands and drinks it slowly with her eyes closed, and that's louder than anything Kagari says. Ayame eats hers and looks at the empty bowl for a long time and says quietly that she's eaten at a duke's table and it wasn't this good. But it's the bath that finishes them. They've been on the road for months. They're adventurers. They bathe in rivers, in horse troughs, in the rain. None of them, I realize as I offer it, has ever in their lives soaked in a hot bath. Not once. It's not a thing that exists here for people like them. So when I show them the gazebo raft and the wooden tub full of clear steaming spring water, and I explain you sit in it in the hot water and you just stay there, they look at me like I've offered them a religious experience. Nanami goes first, loudly skeptical, and then there's a splash and a long silence, and then her voice, very small, floating over the screen. Oh, Kagari's turn nearly overflows the tub. Chizuru soaks with her arms on the rim, reading the horizon like she's on watch even in the bath, which is very her. Yuzuha stays in until her fingers wrinkle and has to be coaxed out, and Ayame last sits in the hot water under the gazebo with the sun going down over the lagoon and says to no one, I could die here and not mind. By the end of the evening I have 5 A-rank adventurers who would, I'm fairly sure, fight a war for me over a bowl of scrap broth and a bath. Chizuru says it out loud, half joking, watching me over the tub rim. You know you've just made the most dangerous party in the South, loyal to a man with a rowboat and a soup. Half joking. Only half. I don't know yet how much I'll need them. I just know that Kagari has eaten 9 bowls of broth and Yuzuha has fallen asleep by the fire, and I'm not alone on this beach anymore. And after weeks of a slime and a boat that's worth more than the platinum. The island changes fast after that. Higanbana talks. A-rank parties are famous, and famous people saying, there's a man on the resort island with a hot bath and food better than a duke's, is the kind of rumor that moves like fire through a rich city. Suddenly the guests aren't just coming for the springs, they're coming for the bath raft, for the broth, for the strange ferryman's cooking. The 4 established captains grind their teeth as more and more passengers specify they want to cross on my boat. The reliable one, the one where the cook is. Koyori sails over to see it for herself and stands on my raft with her hands on her hips and does the fox-eyed recalculation again, and this time I can watch her arrive at the number. You're not a ferryman, she says slowly. You're the reason people come. The island's turning into a resort around you. She looks at the bath, the gazebo, the guests lounging, the broth on the fire. Do you have any idea how much this is worth? 500 platinum, I say, because it's the only number that matters and I've done the math and I'm barely past 4. She thinks I'm joking. She laughs. I don't correct her. That night, I soak in my bath alone, after the guests have gone up the hill to their lodgings. Tamamo bobbing beside me, the fire crackling, the lagoon black, and calm past the comb where nothing else can pass. I run the ledger in my head. 1 platinum banked in climbing, a slime, 2 boats, an A-rank party that owes me its lives, a fixer who stopped underestimating me, and an island reshaping itself around a homesick cook who just wanted somewhere to make soup. Somewhere above, the god of creation is not bored anymore. I can't see him, but I can feel it. The way you feel someone watching you cook, the sense that the rabbit boy's story has finally gotten good and he's not looking away. I sink to my chin in the clean hot water and I think about rice, and I keep rowing toward it. The lawsuit arrives on a fine morning wrapped in a red ribbon and delivered by a guild bailiff who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. I've been on the island 6 weeks now. The resort's grown up around my bath raft, real lodges going up on the hill, the 4 established captains grudgingly cooperating because the island's traffic has tripled, and there's more money for everyone even if I'm eating the richest slice. I've got 3 platinum and change banked with the guild under Koyori's arrangement. Climbing steady. I've been happy, which should have warned me. Nothing stays quiet for me. The bailiff reads the summons aloud in the factor's post while Koyori stands beside me, translating the legal parts into plain speech, her ears flat. The claim. The vessel I use my river skiff, the lacquered one with the manicore, is a stolen heirloom. It belongs by right to the family of one Jinshiro Doi, a mainland merchant of some standing, and it was allegedly taken from his family's estate years ago and has now surfaced in my hands. Doi demands the ship returned and damages for its unlicensed commercial use. His patron and co-plaintiff is a nobleman, Baron Madarashi, whose name the bailiff says with the little wince people give a name that carries weight and menace. Koyori's ears go flatter as she reads the rest. It's a squeeze, she murmurs. They don't want your boat, they want your business. You broke the comb monopoly and made a fortune doing it. Doi's probably fronting for one of the 4 captains, or for someone who wants the resort trade. Take the skiff and the whole thing collapses, no 5th ship, back to scarcity, back to their prices. She looks at me. The boat's Japanese, isn't it, from your world? You can't prove that, I say. No, she agrees. And neither can they prove it's Doi's heirloom, that's the point. It's a lie against a lie, argued in front of a magistrate, and they've got a baron's name and a merchant's coin and lawyers, and you've got a rank F card and a river skiff. She taps the summons. In a normal fight, you lose this. Nobles win squeezes. That's what nobles are for. I should remind you, a terrible negotiator and a worse fighter. Confrontation makes my hands shake. And this is a confrontation dressed in ribbon and law, in front of a magistrate, with a baron on the other side. Every part of me wants to summon the boat, run the comb and vanish north. But I can't run. If I run, they take the ferry trade, and I lose the island. And the island is a whole platinum a week toward rice. So I do the only thing a coward who can't fight can do. I stop trying to win the argument, and I think about the one true thing nobody else in that room knows. The skiff isn't magical. Everyone in this world assumes my boats are enchanted magical vessels, mana-forged, the kind a mage could claim or command. That's the whole premise of Doi's lie, that it's a family heirloom, an object with a maker and a lineage and a mana signature you could in theory trace. But my skiff isn't enchanted at all. It's an ordinary wooden boat. I bought its little mana core, drives the paddle screw, and nothing else. And the reason it can't be sunk or boarded has nothing to do with the boat. It's the skill. The barrier belongs to me, not to the hull. The hull is just wood. And a skill answers to exactly one person in all the world. The holder, me. Which means Doi's whole claim has a beautiful load-bearing flaw. If the ship is really his family's magical heirloom, then he should be able to command it. Enchanted vessels answer to their rightful owner's mana. That's the entire logic of the claim, so let him try. The trial is held in Sionagi, in a hall off the Merchant Guild before a magistrate. And, to my quiet alarm, the Southern Count himself has taken an interest, because a baron accusing a rank F resort ferryman of grand theft has become the season's gossip and the Count likes to be seen doing justice. He sits to the side, an old sharp-eyed man with a chain of office. Watching, Doi is exactly what I pictured. Soft-handed, well-dressed, a man who's never worried about a meal, wearing the confident half-smile of someone who's already been told he's won. Baron Matarashi doesn't attend in person beneath him, but his lawyer does. A lean vulture of a man who does most of the talking. They lay it out smoothly. The Doi family owned a fine mana vessel, a river craft of distinctive lacquer work, lost some years back. Here it is, plainly in the hands of a vagrant adventurer, with no papers to explain how he came by such a thing. They produce a family retainer who swears he recognizes the lacquer pattern. They produce a document, aged and official-looking, describing one lacquered river vessel, mana-driven. It's all very tidy. It's all completely invented. The magistrate turns to me. Do I contest the claim, and on what grounds? I stand up, and my hands are shaking, and Koyori gives me the smallest nod from the gallery. And I say the sentence I've rehearsed 100 times in the bath. I don't contest that it's a lacquered mana vessel, I say. I contest that it's his. And there's a simple way to settle it. If this ship truly belongs to Master Doi's family, if it's the heirloom he claims, then it will answer to his family's mana. Let him launch it in front of everyone. If he can command the ship, it's his, and I'll walk away with nothing. I make myself look at Doi. If he can't, then he's never touched it in his life. And this whole claim is a lie told to steal a poor man's boat. The hall goes quiet. It's the kind of proposal that sounds fair to everyone and only I know is a trap, because I know the one thing nobody else does. There is nothing in that boat to command. The mana core drives a paddle screw, and that's all. There's no enchantment to respond to a rightful owner. The barrier isn't in the wood, it's in me. Doi can pour his whole soul into that hull and get a boat that sits there like the plain wet lumber it is. The magistrate likes it. It's clean, it's public. It settles the matter without a month of dueling documents. The Count leans forward, interested. Doi's lawyer objects irregular, unnecessary. The documents speak for themselves, but the Count overrules him with 2 words, because the Count wants to see it too. Everyone does. There is nothing a crowd loves more than watching a rich man prove himself. They move it to the harbor. The skiff is brought to the public dock. I summon it, actually right there, which draws a gasp I ignore, and let them tie it up. And Genshiro Doi, in his fine clothes, is invited to step aboard his family's heirloom and command it. I hold my breath, because there's exactly one way this goes wrong: the barrier. My boats don't allow boarding without my permission. If Doi steps toward the skiff and gets flung off the way that Rabbit did on the beach, in front of the Count and the whole harbor, that's a disaster. It proves the boat is magical, and rejecting him, which half supports his story and half brands me a mage hiding something. So I do the thing that costs me nothing and saves everything. I grant him permission. Quietly in my head, I let Genshiro Doi aboard my boat. The barrier softens. He can step on, and he does, and nothing happens. It's genuinely painful to watch. Doi stands on the deck of the skiff, and he's clearly been coached on this. He was so confident about the launch that I suspect his lawyer told him, magical vessels respond to a rightful heir. He plants his feet. He pours mana into the hull. I can't see mana, but everyone else can. And I hear the crowd murmur as his hands glow and he presses them to the gunwale and pushes with everything he has. The boat does nothing. The paddle screw doesn't turn because you don't run a mana core by dumping raw mana into the woodwork. You feed it copper dust, which Doi doesn't know because he's never touched this boat in his life. The barrier does nothing because I'm allowing him aboard. The lacquer doesn't light up. No ancestral crest flares. No hum of recognition, because it's a boat I bought from a sick old man for 4 silver. Doi tries again, sweat on his forehead now. He moves to the tiller, does something that clearly makes sense to a man who's used enchanted vessels, and gets nothing. He kicks the mana core housing. Nothing. The crowd's murmur curdles into laughter, first a few, then the whole harbor, because there is nothing funnier than a rich man in fine clothes, red-faced and shoving at a boat that will not obey pay him. A boat he swore under oath was his family's own. His lawyer's face is doing something complicated. The retainer who recognized the lacquer has gone very still. The magistrate calls it. If the vessel does not answer the claimant's mana, the claimant has no bond with it, and the heirloom claim fails on its own logic. And then the count stands up, and the harbor goes quiet. And the old man says the part that makes this a triumph instead of just a win. Perjury. Both of them. Doi swore a false claim under oath, and Baron Matarashi's name is on the co-filing, and the count, who I gather from Koyori's satisfied hiss, has been looking for a reason to clip Matarashi. A rival's man orders Doi arrested on the spot for perjury and false claim, and issues a summons for the Baron to answer for lending his name to it. Guards take Doi off the dock in his fine ruined clothes, and the lawyer suddenly has urgent business elsewhere, and the crowd cheers because a crowd will always cheer when the powerful trip over their own feet. I withdraw my permission the moment Doi's off the deck. Nobody notices. Nobody ever notices the thing that actually matters. The count wants to meet me afterward, which terrifies me more than the trial did. He's sharp and old, and he looks at me the way Koyori first did. Like there's a joke he's decided to be patient about. He asks how a rank-F adventurer came to own a vessel that so thoroughly humiliated a merchant and a baron. I give him my sentence. I have a special boat. I bought it honestly, and I make my living ferrying guests through the comb. He doesn't believe the special boat is as simple as I make it sound. Nobody smart ever does, but he can't prove otherwise, and more to the point, he doesn't want to. I just handed him Matarashi's neck. He's pleased with me the way you're pleased with a useful tool. He tells me, as I'm leaving, that the whole harbor is talking about the ferryman whose boat obeys no one but him, and that fame like that is a double-edged thing, and I should mind who I let close to it. I already know. I've known since the beach in Yumisato. The more people understand my skill, the more danger I'm in. Today I won because nobody understood it, because Doi assumed magic where there was only a coward and a truth. But fame is spreading now whether I want it or not. The ferryman whose boat can't be sunk, can't be broken, can't be taken. That story is going to travel. Koyori finds me on the dock that evening, and she's practically vibrating. Do you understand what just happened? She says. You beat a baron in public, and the count owes you a favor now, whether he says so or not. She paces. Your fame's worth more than the ferry trade at this point, but... And here she stops, and the fox eyes go serious. Open water's not the comb, Naoya. You've been running a 3-day coast hop in a river skiff. If you're going to trade for real cargo, real distance, real money toward whatever your 500 platinum is, you need a real ship. And open water past the coast has pirates and reefs, the barrier'll shrug off, but crews you can't crew alone, and storms that'll pin a skiff for a week. She spreads her hands. You've outgrown the toy. She's right. I've been thinking it myself. The rabbit loop scaled to the ferry loop. Now the ferry loop needs to scale to real trade, and real trade needs a real hull, more berths, more storage, room for crew and cargo, something that can cross real sea. And every ship I buy levels the skill besides, so I do it. With Koyori's help, I find it in the Seonagi yards, a proper coastal cruiser, 15 berths, a broad hold, 2 masts, and a mana-assisted screw, sound and honest and big after 2 months of river toys. She's called the Mizuho, a good name, a homeworld name, abundant harvest, and I take it as a sign. She costs most of what I've banked. I hand over the platinum stack and feel it in my teeth the way I felt the 4 silver, except the number's 100 times bigger now, and so is everything. The skill chimes as I register her. Vessel registered, Mizuho, cruiser type, berths, 15, ship summoning level up, rank E to rank D, new capacity, 3 registered vessels may be held, stasis storage expanded, crew assignment unlocked. 3 ships in my head now, the rowboat, the skiff, and the Mizuho. I stand at the Mizuho's rail in the Seonagi yards with Tamamo on my shoulder, and I look out past the harbor mouth at open sea. Real open sea, gray and vast and full of things that would kill a lesser man, and none of which can touch my deck. I beat a baron with a boat that won't start. Now I've got a ship that can cross a sea. The horizon's still 500 platinum away, but I've got a hull under me that can actually chase it. Koyori comes to stand beside me at the rail, looking at the same sea, already doing the math on cargo and routes I haven't even thought of yet. So, she says, where does the market breaker sail first? The first thing I learn about owning a 15-berth ship is that I cannot crew it alone. And the second thing I learn is that in this world you can buy people, not slaves, exactly. Koyori is very careful to explain the distinction, and it matters. There's a divine contract, sworn to the god of commerce, that binds a master and a debt servant. The servant works off a debt they can't otherwise pay, and the contract has 2 hard rules written into it by the god himself. The master cannot use violence against the servant. The servant cannot flee the contract. It's enforced by divinity, not chains break either rule, and the god's mark burns you. It's how a bankrupt person survives in a world with no bankruptcy court, and it's how a merchant crews a ship without press gangs. Koyori tells me it's the most humane version of a bad thing, and that plenty of masters find loopholes to be cruel inside the letter of it, and that whether it's decent depends entirely on the master. I hate the whole idea. I say so. Koyori just looks at me with those fox eyes and says, then be a decent one. Better you than the alternative for whoever you take. There's a fire mage at the block tomorrow who's going to a mining company otherwise, and they work people to death underground. So I go to the block, and that's how I meet Hibari. Hibari Akagane is 19, fire tiger tribe beastkin, orange and black hair, small rounded tiger ears, a tail that lashes when she's angry, which is most of the time. She's on the block because she gambled herself into a hole so deep the only way out was to sell her own contract, and she's furious about it, at herself mostly, and she's standing up there glaring at the buyers like she'd set the whole platform on fire if the mark wouldn't stop her. Fire magic, real fire magic, the practical kind that can boil a pot or gut a boarding party. The mining company's factor is already bidding. I outbid him. It hurts servants aren't cheap and I'm freshly poor from buying the Mizuho, but I do it. And when the God's Mark contract seals between us, Hibari looks at me, this soft-handed coward in a hoodie, and says flatly, "You're my master? You? And then I'll cook better than you and steal your job in a month." "You will not," I say, "cook better than me." And it's the first thing I've said to her that isn't scared, because on the subject of cooking, I have no fear at all. The second servant I take the same week, and she's the one who changes what I'm doing here, though I don't know it yet. Shiori Yukikaze is a dark elf, and she is 62 years old, which on a dark elf reads as a grave, elegant woman of maybe 40 by human eyes, silver white hair, dark skin, a stillness like Yuzuha's but older, sadder. She's the daughter of an elder. She's a barrier mage, genuinely skilled, the kind of ability that any ship's captain would kill to have aboard for storms and boarding defense. And she's on the block for a reason that makes my stomach turn. She's not there for a debt. She's there because she's a dark elf, a non-human. And in half the human kingdoms of this world, her people are hunted, driven off their land, taken as property wherever the divine contract's protections get argued away. Her family sold her contract to a decent guild, specifically to keep her out of the hands of the kingdoms that wouldn't bother with a contract at all. A debt servancy was the safest cage available. I take her contract for the same reason I took Hibari's. Better me than the alternative. Shiori doesn't rage like Hibari. She just inclines her head, dignified, and says, "I will serve honestly, master. I ask only that you are honest in return." And I say she doesn't have to call me master. And Hibari, standing there, snorts and says, "Good luck with that." And she's right. They both keep calling me master for a long time out of pure stubbornness. I have a crew now. A furious fire tiger who wants my kitchen, a grieving elf who could wall out a hurricane, and a slime that rides on a cushion. Koyori signs on as trade agent, taking a cut instead of a contract, because Koyori will never in her life let anyone own her, and I respect that. 4 of us and a slime on a 15-berth ship. "Where do we sail?" Hibari demands, already at the galley, already inspecting my knives with theatrical disdain, "so I can start being better than you at this." "We sail south." Real south, past the coast, past the resort island's latitude, across open water toward the southern continent. And Koyori lays out why on the first night at sea over a pot of the fish stew, Hibari and I are silently, competitively cooking. There's a route to the southern continent that traders talk about the way soldiers talk about a bad hill. 25 days across open sea, through a stretch of water so bad storms, pirates, a maze of shoals near the far coast that the standing figure is 1 ship in 30 comes back. 1 in 30. Merchants run it only when the profit's obscene enough to gamble a hull and a crew, and the profit is obscene because on the southern continent right now, a specific thing is happening. A king died, 2 of his sons are fighting over the throne, and it's tipping toward open war. And when war is coming, Koyori explains, ledgers get liquidated. The merchant houses of the southern continent are trying to convert everything into portable wealth and get out before the fighting closes. The ports, which means they're dumping goods, cash out fire sales, and the biggest dump is pepper. Southern pepper. The real thing worth a fortune in the north. And right now the guild down there is selling it at half price to anyone who'll take it off their hands before the war does. Because a warehouse of pepper is worthless if a soldier burns it, and a purse of coin is not. 1 ship in 30, I repeat. For anyone else, Koyori says, and looks at me. "How many storms has your ship lost to?" "None." The answer is none. The barrier eats storms the way it ate the rapids. Pirates can't board me. Shoals can't gut me. The 25-day run that kills 29 ships out of 30 is for me 25 boring days of Hibari and me fighting over a stove. The one route in the world priced for near certain death is a milk run for a man whose boats can't be sunk or broken or boarded. It's the comb again, scaled to an ocean. "We buy all the pepper," I say. "We buy all the pepper," Koyori agrees, grinning. The crossing is exactly as advertised for everyone but us. We hit a storm on the 6th day that Shiori braces for out of instinct before she remembers she doesn't have to. The Mizuho rides it dry and flat, the barrier shrugging off waves that would roll a real ship, and Shiori stands at the rail watching a wall of gray water fail to touch us and says, quietly, that she has never in 62 years felt safe on the sea, and now she does. And it's a strange thing to feel. Hibari, who gets seasick and is furious about that too, curls up in the galley and demands I make her something that stays down. And I make her rice porridge plain, soft, the thing my mother made me when I was small and sick, and she eats it and goes quiet, and doesn't insult my cooking for a whole day, which is how I know she loved it. Pirates find us on day 14. 2 lean, fast hulls and my crew tenses. And Shiori raises her hands for a barrier she doesn't need, and I just keep sailing straight at them, and through the gap between them, and their grapples fly and hit the barrier and rebound, and their boarders leap and get flung back into their own decks screaming, and we sail out the other side untouched with Kagari-level appetite unaffected. The pirates give up after the second failed grapple, mystified. Hibari, who'd wanted to fight them, is deeply disappointed. There was nothing to burn. "You're the most boring pirate target in the world," she complains, and I take it as the highest praise. The southern continent is chaos, and it's chaos with a fire sale in the middle of it. The port city we make a place of ochre stone and unfamiliar spice smells is packed with merchants trying to leave, and refugees trying to leave, and soldiers of both princes trying to conscript everyone who can hold a spear. The guild is in full liquidation panic. Koyori goes to work, and I watch her do the thing she does, and it's like watching Hibari cook with fire, a mastery I don't have and won't pretend to. She finds the guild factor who's most desperate, who's got a warehouse of pepper he needs to convert to coin before the second prince's army reaches the district, and she squeezes him gently because he's already broken, but thoroughly down below even the half price everyone's paying because we're paying in hard coin. Now, in full, no credit, and a bird in the hand at war is worth 10 in a burning warehouse. We buy the whole warehouse. It fills the Mizuho's hold and then some, and I move the overflow into the stasis locker, where the pepper will sit outside of time, dry and perfect, until I sell it in the north for 4, 5, 6 times what I paid. It's the single biggest thing I've ever bought. My hands shake signing it. The old confrontation shake, and Koyori puts a hand on my arm and says, "Breathe. Market breaker. This is the good kind of terrifying." While Koyori runs the pepper, I learn 2 things that mark me. The first is small and enormous. I'm walking the market and I see cloth, good cloth, dyed, the kind that sells well in the north, and a stall selling it for 5 silver a bolt, and I think that's a fine price and nearly buy a load. Then 2 blocks on, at the docks where the weavers actually work, the same cloth is selling for 1/10 of that, half a silver a bolt, because near the source there's a glut and no buyers, everyone's fleeing and nobody's there to carry it north. Same cloth, 10 times the price, 2 streets apart, and the only difference is the 2 streets and a boat willing to cross a killing ocean. I stand there with the 2 bolts in my hands and I mutter out loud, trade is a terrifying thing, because I finally feel it that the whole game, the entire loop toward my 500 platinum is just this. The gap between where a thing is cheap and where a thing is dear, and I own the one boat that can cross the gap that kills everyone else. I buy the cheap cloth too. Of course I do. The second thing marks me deeper. Shiori comes to me on our last evening in port, on the Mizuho's deck, and she's more still than usual, which for Shiori means something's cost her a great deal to decide. She stands at the rail and looks south, further south, past the war, past the ports, out at the empty sea. "Master," she says, "I have a request, and you may refuse it, and I will not think less of you." She keeps her eyes on the water. "My people, the Dark Elves, we had a home once in the north, before the human kingdoms decided we were not people and took it. What's left of my clan, 35 of us, live now as we can, hidden, moved from place to place, and it is only a matter of time before a kingdom that doesn't honor the gods' contract simply takes us, the way they take anything they call property." Her jaw tightens. There must be islands out there, empty land, places no kingdom has claimed and no map has named. If there were an island, just an island, a safe rock in the sea where a kingdom's arm doesn't reach, my people could live, could stop running. She finally looks at me and her dignity cracks just enough to show what's underneath it. "You have the one ship in the world that could find such a place and reach it safely. I'm asking you to help me look. I have nothing to pay you with but the rest of my service." I think about the god's promise. 500 platinum, rice, home, a white ship, a shop full of the food I miss. That's what I'm building toward, and every day I spend looking for an empty island is a day not spent chasing it. I think about a rabbit on a beach, and a boat that flung it away, and how the first thing I ever felt in this world was safe behind a wall nothing could cross. "We'll look," I say. "After we sell the pepper, I'll take you to find your island." Shiori doesn't cry. She's too old and too dignified for that. But she bows to me, very low, the way she didn't bow when I bought her contract. And she says, "Then I serve you gladly, Naoya, and not because a god made me." And it's the first time she said my name. Hibari, eavesdropping from the galley as always, sticks her head out and says, "So we're finding elves an island now? Fine. But I'm still going to be a better cook than you by the time we get back." And it breaks the moment exactly the way it needs breaking, and I laugh. And even Shiori's mouth twitches. We sail north with a hold full of half-price pepper worth a fortune, a stasis locker full of 10 times margin cloth, a fire tiger who's stopped hating me, an elf who's given me a reason to look at the sea and see something besides money, and a slime asleep on a cushion. The killing route doesn't kill us. It never will. I stand at the rail on the crossing back and do the arithmetic I do every night: pepper margin, cloth margin. What it banks toward 500 platinum, and for the first time the number doesn't feel like a horizon that never gets closer. It feels like something I might actually reach. And then I think about Shiori's empty island, and I realize the loop isn't just about rice anymore. Somewhere in the last 2 months, without deciding to, I started building something that helps other people stop running. The god watching is going to hate how much that improves the show. The pepper makes me rich, and I don't even get to enjoy it. Because the day the coin lands is the day I promised Shiori we'd start looking for an island. And a promise to Shiori is a thing I've discovered I take more seriously than money. The numbers, since you'll want them. We sold the pepper through Koyori's guild contacts in the northern ports over 2 weeks, spread out so we didn't crash the price on ourselves. I learned that lesson in Umezato with the rabbits, and it came in at just over 4 times what we paid, even after Koyori's cut and the guild's fees and the tariffs. The cloth doubled. All told, the run banked me a shade over 90 platinum on top of what I'd saved. I sit in the Mizuho's cabin the night the last of it clears, and I look at the ledger, and I have crossed 100 platinum for the first time. A fifth of the way to Rice, a fifth of the way to home. Hibari wants to celebrate. Koyori wants to reinvest immediately. Already talking about a second cargo run, the fox eyes glittering. Shiori says nothing, but she watches me, and she doesn't have to say anything because I made her a promise. We look for the island first, I tell them. Reinvest after. Koyori sighs the sigh of a woman watching a fortune sit idle. Hibari shrugs. She likes the elf. Everyone likes the elf. And Shiori bows the low bow again, and I tell her again to stop doing that. And she doesn't. We provision heavy. This is the part I actually take seriously, because searching empty ocean for an unmapped island isn't the pepper run. There's no port at the end of it, no market, no resupply. There's just us out past the edge of any chart, looking. So I load the Mizuho's hold and the stasis locker with dried meat, hard bread, grain, oil, salt, enough for the 4 of us for 2 months. Though with the stasis locker holding things outside of time, I could stretch it far longer than the food would otherwise last. Water I don't worry about. Tamamo makes any water clean. Even the day we catch rain in a spread of canvas and the slime purifies a full cask of it in an hour. That's the one survival problem the sea usually kills you with. Thirst, and I've got a slime that solves it. Food, sleep, the barrier for storms, I've accounted for all of it. The thing I haven't accounted for is how long it takes and what that does to people. One more thing I take seriously, and it's Koyori's counsel. We run this quiet. She's already noticed the risk that a trader who ships the killing southern route and always comes home is exactly the kind of story that draws eyes to a special ship. So she muddies our sailings through the guild ledgers, books us under other names, spaces the departures so no clerk in any port can add up how often the Mizuho crosses water that eats 1 hull in 30. The whole search she keeps off the books entirely. A man looking for an island nobody's supposed to find doesn't leave a wake anyone can follow. We sail south and then west off the trade lanes into water where the Mizuho's the only ship for the whole horizon. Koyori's guild had rumors old sailors talk of land out past the shipping lanes, islands that ships glimpse in storms and never find again because no sane captain steers toward uncharted water. We chase the rumors, we find nothing but sea. Days pass. A week, 2. Here's the thing, nobody tells you about searching. It's boring, and boredom eats a crew faster than danger does. Danger, at least, my ship laughs off. Boredom, it can't touch. Hibari, who needs something to be angry at, or she gets restless and mean, starts picking fights with the horizon. Shiori goes quieter and quieter as the days give her nothing, and I can see her starting to wonder if she spent my goodwill and her hope on a fool's errand. If there is no island, if her people will run forever and she asked a good man to waste his fortune proving it. Koyori keeps busy doing sums, but even Koyori's sums run out. And I cook. That's my whole contribution to morale, and it turns out to be enough. And it teaches me something about what I actually am. I can't fight the boredom with a sword or a spell, but I can make sure that at the end of every gray identical day, there's a hot meal that's different from yesterday's, and that turns out to be the load-bearing thing. I ration the interesting ingredients like they're gold, a little spice one night, the last of the fresh fish the next, a sweet thing on the 7th day, just because 7 feels like it should be marked. I make Hibari's mother's dish, whatever a fire tiger childhood dish is from her description, badly the first time, and better the second, and she pretends it's terrible and eats all of it, and gets quiet. I make Shiori something the dark elves ate in their lost home, from her memory, and she eats it looking out at the sea, and afterward she says, I did not think I would taste that again in my life. And that's worth more than the pepper. A meal is a promise that tomorrow's coming is what I learn. That's the whole trick of cooking for people who are afraid. You're not feeding their stomachs. You're telling them there'll be a tomorrow, and here's proof. It's warm, eat it. The storm hits on the 16th day, and it's the worst weather I've seen. A real ocean storm, black to the horizon, waves that would break a real ship in half, on any of the 29 ships that don't come back from the southern route. This is where the crew drowns. We ride it out for a day and a night, and the barrier does what the barrier always does, which is nothing. In the best possible sense, the deck stays dry. The Mizuho doesn't heal. The waves that would swamp us simply fail to arrive against the hull. Hibari's sick and furious. Shiori braces herself the way she always braces, the old instinct, and then makes herself let go of the rail and stand loose, trusting the boat, and I watch her do it and understand. It's a kind of therapy for her that a woman who spent 62 years never safe is teaching her body, storm by storm, that safe is real now. And when the storm blows out on the morning of the 17th day and the sky cracks open blue and washed clean, there's land on the horizon. It's not the island. I need to be honest about this because it's the low point of the whole search. We steer toward it with our hearts in our throats, and it takes half a day to reach. And when we get there, it's a rock, barely bigger than the Mizuho herself. A hump of black stone with a few tough shrubs, no fresh water, no soil worth the word, a place where 35 people would starve in a month. Shiori stands at the rail looking at it, and I watch her hope go out like a snuffed lamp, and she says very quietly, I brought you all the way out here for this, and turns away so I won't see her face. Hibari, of all people, is the one who handles it. She goes to Shiori and doesn't say anything comforting. Hibari can't. It's not in her. She just leans on the rail beside her and says roughly, 1 rock down. See's big boss'll find you a better one. He's too stubborn to quit, and too soft to say no to you. And that's exactly true. And Shiori laughs, wetly, once, and I add a mark to the chart. Rock. No, and we sail on. That's the moment I decide I don't turn back until we find it. Not for Shiori's sake anymore though, that's part of it. Because I've realized that the whole reason I have this stupid garbage skill, the whole reason I can cross oceans that kill everyone else cannot just be for pepper margins and rice. It can't. If the one man in the world who can find an empty island refuses to look, then the elves run forever, and I'll have had the power to stop it and spent it on soy sauce. I decide, somewhere off that useless rock, that I'm going to find it if it takes all summer. We find it 8 days later, and I know it the moment it comes over the horizon, because it's green. Not a rock. An island, a real one, big enough to hold a village and 100 villages, hills furred with forest. And when we come close enough, I see the thing that makes Shiori grip the rail so hard her knuckles go pale. A river mouth, silver running down out of the green hills into the sea. Fresh water. Where there's a river like that, there's soil, and game, and everything 35 people need to stop running and start living. We anchor in the river mouth and go ashore in the skiff, and I walk up the riverbank into forest that has never heard a human voice, and I don't have the words a real writer would have. There's no path because no one's ever walked here. There are birds that don't startle at us because they've never learned to fear a person. There's game. I see deer things drinking at the river that look up at us with no fear at all. And Hibari, hunter that she is, whispers, "We could live off this land alone for years." There's no ruin, no marker, no old wall, no sign that anyone has ever claimed this place or ever will find it, because it's off every chart in a stretch of ocean that kills the ships that would map it. It's an island the size of a home, in a sea that protects it, that no kingdom can reach. Shiori kneels down on the riverbank and puts both hands flat on the earth. And she stays like that for a long time, and her shoulders shake, and none of us say anything. 62 years. Her whole people, generations of running, of being called property, of moving in the night before the soldiers came. And here is soil that will hold them, that no baron owns, that no kingdom has bothered to want, because no kingdom could reach it. When she finally stands, she doesn't bow to me. She takes both my hands in both of hers, and she says, "You have given my people the one thing no one has offered us in 300 years. A place." And then, because she's Shiori and dignity always wins, she adds, "I will spend the rest of my service repaying it, and it will not be enough, and I will keep serving anyway." I say, "You don't have to call me master," which is what I always say. And she says, "I stopped meaning it that way a month ago," which is new. And Hibari makes a gagging noise from up the bank, and the moment breaks and we all laugh, standing in a forest no human has ever stood in. And I think, this is the best thing I've done since I drowned. Better than the Baron, better than the pepper. This one I'll keep. We plan the migration on the sail back, and I make sure the plan is possible, because I've learned that hope makes people plan foolishly. 35 elves. The Mizuho has 15 berths meant for 15, but Shiori's people are hidden in a single place on the mainland coast, a hardscrabble refuge. Shiori knows the way too, and for a short crossing we can pack more than 15 aboard for the passage, sleeping in shifts, the way any refugee ship overloads. Still, 35 people plus their whole lives, tools, seed, livestock, if they have any, everything they'll need to start a settlement from nothing that's not one trip. So, 2 runs. First run, half the people and the heavy startup goods, get the settlement founded, shelter up, a garden started, so the land's not raw when the vulnerable arrive. Second run, the rest, the elders, the young, the ones who can't rough it. It's weeks of sailing, the mainland refuge to the island and back, twice. But the barrier means the crossing itself is safe, and the stasis locker means their seed and food, and any fodder they bring for livestock won't spoil, and tamamo means fresh water the whole way. It works. I check it 3 times in my head, the way I check a recipe, and it works. Koyori, when she hears the plan, does the fox-eyed math and points out, not unkindly, that I'm about to spend weeks and a good chunk of goodwill and provisions on a venture that earns me exactly nothing, no pepper, no cloth, no platinum toward my 500. "You know that," she says, "you're doing it anyway." "I'm doing it anyway." I agree. She looks at me for a long moment, this mercenary fox who never does anything without a cut, and then she says something that surprises me. "Then I'll help for free. Once." She holds up a finger. "Once. Don't tell anyone, it ruins my rates." And Hibari, who'd fight me for the kitchen and lose, says she's in. Obviously someone has to feed 35 elves, and it's going to be her, not me, and I let her think that. And Shiori sits at the Mizuho's rail watching the island shrink behind us with an expression I haven't seen on her before. And it takes me a while to place it because I've never seen it on her at all. It's a future. She's looking at a future. Her people have one now. I stand at the rail beside her and let myself feel it too. For a while that a drowned coward with a garbage skill and an oar found an empty green island and gave 35 hunted people a place to stop running, and it cost me a fortune I didn't earn back, and I don't regret a single copper of it. The god wherever he's watching must be losing his mind. He gave me power to make his show exciting, and I keep spending it on the least exciting, most human things imaginable: soup and safety, and now a home for people no one else would carry. I hope he hates it. I hope Hikari Haim, whoever she is watching too, and I hope she understands it better than he does. We sail north to fetch the first 35, and I have no idea that one of them is going to try to throw himself into the sea to prove I'm a monster. The Dark Elves. Refuge is a scrape of poor land up a coastal valley the human kingdoms decided wasn't worth taking, and it holds 35 people who have been waiting 300 years for someone to arrive and not be a soldier. Shiori guides us in. The elder, her father, an old dark elf named Yukikaze, older even than Shiori, with the same silver hair, the dark elf color gone thin with his true age, and the same terrible dignity comes down to meet us. And I watch Shiori kneel to him and tell him what we found. And I watch a 300-year weight come off an old man's shoulders in real time. He doesn't believe it at first. Then he does. Then he weeps, silently. The way old people weep when they've spent their tears on smaller griefs and thought there were none left. They vote on it, which surprises me. The elder doesn't just command. The clan decides together. That's how a people who've been property learn to value the one thing they're never given. Most vote yes instantly. Some are afraid of the sea, of trusting a human, of a hope that will turn out to be a rock again. But Shiori's word carries, and the elders, and by evening it's settled. They'll go. First run 17 of the strong and the settlers-to-be, plus tools and seed and their small herd of goats. Second run, the other 18. The elders, the children, the ones who can't clear a forest. I check the plan one more time. 17 people, goats and cargo, on a 15-berth cruiser for a crossing that's several days off the lanes, crowded, sleeping in shifts, but survivable. And the stasis locker takes the seed and the food and the fodder for the goats so nothing can spoil, and Tamamo takes the water. It works. It's tight, but it works, and I've stopped taking it works in my head for granted. So I walk the whole ship with Hibari and count the sleeping space twice. And then, the night before we sail, Kuroto tries to burn it all down. Kuroto is a young dark elf, maybe Shiori's age and appearance, which is to say young for their kind, and he is in love with Shiori. It takes me exactly one evening to see it. The way he watches her, the way he stands too close and too far at once, and he does not trust me, and I understand why. A human has appeared out of nowhere, bought Shiori's contract, and now the whole clan is uprooting their entire existence on the word of a man who owns her. From the inside, if you don't know me, that's not a rescue. That's a slaver with a sweeter mouth than most. And Shiori is a captive praising her captor because that's what captives do to survive. And everyone who loves her is about to sail her out to a private island, where no one will ever find her again. I can't even be angry at him. He's wrong about every fact and right about every instinct. If I were a monster, this is exactly what it would look like. He goes to the elder in the night and argues it. The humans brainwashed Shiori. This island is a trap. They'll sail out past the last chart and be sold, or worse. And the clan is walking onto a slave ship holding hands and thanking the slaver. He's persuasive because he's sincere. A few of the frightened ones waver. Shiori's father does something I respect enormously. He doesn't dismiss Kuroto. He takes the fear seriously, because a people who ignore the possibility of betrayal die of it. But he also weighs 300 years of running against his own daughter's word, and the green island she described down to the silver of the river. And he decides, they sail, and because he knows his own people, and knows Kuroto won't accept the vote, he binds him, has Kuroto held under watch, restrained, for the crossing. So a young man's terror doesn't get them all killed doing something foolish at sea. Kuroto comes aboard bound. He glares at me the entire loading, and I load his people's goats and their seed and their tools with my own hands, and I let him glare. Because there's nothing I can say to a man that will convince him I'm not the thing he's afraid of. Only time does that. Only being not a monster for long enough in front of him. We sail. 17 dark elves. A small herd of goats. A hold and a stasis locker full of the physical remains of 300 years of survival, one furious fire tiger cooking for all of them, and one bound young man who thinks I'm going to drop them all into the sea the moment we're out of sight of land. 3 days out off every chart in open water, Kuroto makes his move. He's worked his bindings loose patient. All-night work. The kind you can only do if you're absolutely certain you're right, and everyone else is a fool. And there's a sea serpent shadowing us, has been since dawn. A big one. A real threat to a real ship, the kind of thing that would sink any of the 29 ships that don't come back. It surfaces off the port side, huge, and the elves cry out, and this is Kuroto's proof. This is his moment, because he's decided the safe ship is a lie that the humans talk of a boat nothing can touch, is exactly the kind of thing a slaver says to keep his cargo calm, and he's going to prove the ship is a death trap by forcing it to fail. He gets free, and he runs to the rail, and he shouts something I don't fully catch, that he'd rather die free than be sold. That he'll show them all the ship can't save them, and he throws himself over the side, straight toward the sea serpent, to prove that the boat will let him die, that the safety was a lie, that I'm a monster, and the sea is honest. Except the barrier doesn't work the way he thinks. Here's the thing I understand about my skill that Kuroto does not. The barrier doesn't block just any leaving. It blocks any crossing of the boundary that happens against my will. The master decides who passes in or out. My crew steps ashore freely because I let them. The barrier holds only what I don't release. And I never gave Kuroto permission to leave the deck, least of all to fling himself at a monster. So when he crosses the rail outward, unauthorized, the barrier catches him the same way it flung the rabbit on the beach, the same way it throws back a boarder and Kuroto hits the invisible wall and it flings him back, and he lands sprawled and stunned on the Mizuho's deck. Unharmed, exactly where he started, gasping. The barrier holds what I don't release in or out. That's the whole rule. And Kuroto just learned it the hard way. And the sea serpent strikes the ship, full force. The whole hull rings with it. The elves scream and the barrier eats it. Of course, the serpent's charge rebounding on itself so hard the thing recoils and dives and doesn't come back. And the Mizuho rides on, dry and whole. Not a scratch, not a soul lost. Kuroto lies on the deck he tried to escape, alive because the boat wouldn't let him die, staring at the water where a sea serpent just failed to sink us. His entire argument that the ship was a trap, that safety was a slaver's lie, is lying broken on the deck around him because he just personally tested it in the worst possible way, and the ship saved his life against his own will. The elves are looking at him, and at me, and the boat that just refused to let a man drown himself. I don't punish him. I want to be clear about this, because it's the whole point. Hibari wants to. She's furious. He endangered 17 people and the goats, and her tail's lashing, and there's fire flickering at her fingertips. Shiori is white-faced and rigid, caught between the man she serves and the man who loves her, and I can see her bracing for me to be cruel, because everyone she's ever known who held power over others used it. The elder looks at me too, and this is the test. This is the moment they all find out what kind of man carried them to sea. I kneel down next to Kuroto, who flinches like I'm going to hit him. And I don't. I say the boat won't let you die. It won't let anyone board it or leave it against my will, including to drown themselves for a point. So you can stop testing it. You'll just keep hurting yourself. He stares at me. And then I say the thing that ends it. The thing I've thought about for 3 days watching him glare at me while I carried his people's goats. You think I've brainwashed her? You think I own her and she's grateful the way captives get grateful? I keep my voice even. No heat in it. You love her, so go ask her. Not me, her. Ask Shiori to marry you right now, in front of everyone, freely. I stand up. If she says yes, I release her contract this hour. I set you both ashore at your island, a free man and a free woman, and I never take a copper for it. I step aside completely. I look at him. But you have to actually ask her, and she has to actually answer. And you have to believe her answer, because if I'd broken her, she'd say what I wanted. So ask and listen, and then you'll know what I am. It's the only move I have, and it's not a clever trader's move. It's the opposite. I'm offering to give away a valuable contract and let a servant walk free on the word of a man who tried to sink my ship. Koyori would have an aneurysm, but it's the only thing that proves I'm not what he thinks, because a monster would never make this offer. A monster keeps his property. Kuroto gets up. He looks at Shiori, and in front of 17 dark elves and a fire tiger and a slime, shaking, he asks her. Shiori is kind about it, which is worse for him than cruelty would be. She tells him she cares for him as clan, as one of the last of a dying people, that she is honored, and that she does not love him that way, has never, that her heart isn't a thing she can gift out of pity or duty, and that no, she will not marry him. And then, because she's Shiori, she adds the part that saves him. And Naoya did not make me say this. If he had any hold on my heart, I would have taken your offer to escape him. I refuse you as a free woman. Understand what that means about the man you tried to drown yourself to expose. Kuroto understands. You can see it land. He's rejected and humbled. And worst of all, for a young man's pride proven wrong in front of everyone by the very freedom he was trying to defend. He sits down on the deck and puts his face in his hands, and no one gloats, not even Hibari, because there's nothing to gloat about. He was brave and loyal and completely wrong, and that's just sad. He comes to me that night, at the rail, while the elves sleep below in shifts. He can't look at me. He says he's sorry. He says he was so sure. He says a human has never once in his life been anything but a threat, and he built his whole understanding of me out of that, and he was wrong, and it nearly killed everyone he loves. And then he says the thing that matters. You could have kept her. You had the god's contract. You had a servant who's grateful and skilled, and you offered to give her away to a man who tried to sink your ship on nothing but her word. No slaver does that. No master does that. He finally looks at me. I don't understand you, but I'm not afraid of you anymore. And if you ever need a man who owes you his life and his shame, both, that's me. I tell him I don't need anything from him except that he help his people build the settlement and be good to Shioria's clan, which he will. And I mean it. I bank the goodwill without thinking of it as banking anything. The way I banked Higanbana's on the river. I've got no idea I'll need Kuroto someday, that a young dark elf's shame will turn into a man who leads a second line of ships and helps drag me off a rock where I'm about to lose the only fight I ever fought. That's a long way off right now. He's just a boy who was wrong and is trying to be a man about it. We reach the island and land the first 17, and it's the good kind of exhausting clearing ground, raising the first shelters, penning the goats, breaking the first garden with the seed out of the stasis locker. Still perfect and unspoiled. Kuroto works like a man trying to bury something, which he is, and it makes him the hardest worker on the island, which is its own kind of healing. Shiori stands in the settlement she'll one day help lead, and watches her people put roots into soil no kingdom owns, and I catch her crying again. And this time she lets me see it. We sail back for the second 18, the elders, the children, the old ones who couldn't clear forest, and that runs easier because the settlement's already there to receive them. Shelter up and a garden started and a place that already smells like home instead of raw wilderness. 35 dark elves. The whole clan, the last of a people 300 years hunted, on an island in a sea that protects them, in a home that no one owns and no one can reach. The elder, before I leave the second time, does something dark elves apparently don't do lightly. He names me, gives me a place in the clan's memory, a debt of blood their people record and honor across generations. Shiori explains it later. Her people forget nothing and repay everything. That it's the discipline that kept them alive, and that I am now written into that memory as the human who carried them home. It means, she says, that if you are ever in the worst trouble of your life, and my people can reach you, they will come without being asked, because that is what the memory is for. I tell her I hope I never need it, which is true and which will turn out not to matter. I sail away from the island with an empty hold and a full chest, and Koyori waiting in the north to yell at me about how much money I didn't make, and Hibari already planning the meal she'll cook when we get back to prove she's better than me at it, and Shiori stays for a while to help her people root. She'll rejoin me, but for now she stands on the beach of her own people's island and raises a hand as we go, and it's the strangest feeling, sailing away from something you built that you don't own and don't profit from, and will love for the rest of your life. Somewhere above, I like to think even the bored god went quiet for a minute. Then I did the arithmetic because I always do, and I remembered I'm 100-odd platinum toward 500, and I've just spent weeks earning nothing. And I turned the Mizuho north toward the next cargo and the rice at the end of it all, not knowing that the next stop, a vacation to a cathedral, was going to make me richer than Pepper ever did, and drop a god's warning in my lap that a disaster was coming for everything I'd built. The vacation is Koyori's idea, and it is, she insists, actually a business trip, which is how she gets me to agree to it. I've been working without stopping since I drowned. Rabbits, ferry, Pepper. The island over a year now, near enough in this world, and I have 100-odd platinum banked in a growing operation, and I have not rested a single day. Koyori points out correctly that a man who never stops makes bad decisions, and that the greatest cathedral on the continent is having its once-a-decade festival, and that where a festival like that is, money is pilgrims, nobles, guilds, the cardinal himself holding court, and that if I want the next big score I should be there, eating well, sleeping in a real bed, and letting deals come to me for once. Also, Higanbana is going, because Sumire, their priestess, has apparently been talking about this festival for 2 years. So we go. The whole strange family of us, me, Koyori, Hibari, Shiori, rejoined from the island. Her people rooted enough to spare her, Tamamo on its cushion, and Higanbana meeting us there. It's the first time in a year I've traveled somewhere purely to arrive, and I keep waiting for it to feel wasteful, and it just feels good. Amano Takumi summons me on the second day, and this time it's different, because this time he's not alone. I'm at the cathedral, an enormous thing, all soaring stone and colored glass and gold, and a priest pulls me aside to a chamber with a sacred pool, same as Umezato, and the water lights up. But when I look through it, up into the too bright god place, the man-child on his throne isn't slouching and smug. He's sitting up straight, and he looks like a boy who's been called into the principal's office. Because standing beside his throne is a woman. She's a goddess I don't need telling. The light bends around her differently, and where Ama no Takumi is all vanity and gold, she's plain and clean and bright, and she is unmistakably furious with him. Hikari Hime, goddess of light. He introduces her through gritted teeth like a boy naming the teacher who caught him. So this is the mortal, Hikari Hime says, looking down through the pool at me. Her voice is nothing like his. No everywhere echo, just a clear steady voice like someone speaking across a table. The one you gave a legendary skill for a joke, called garbage to save your pride, and have been meddling with ever since. Ama no Takumi starts to protest. She talks over him, and it's the most satisfying thing I've heard in a year. She lays into him, right in front of me, for exactly what he is. He gave a world-shaking skill to a mortal out of pure boredom, hoping to be entertained. He labeled it garbage in the divine registry out of spite and vanity when the other gods laughed. And then, when the mortal turned out to be interesting when I started building something, he couldn't leave it alone. He dangled the liner. He meddled. You keep reaching into the board to move the piece, she says, because you cannot bear that the piece is better than the hand that placed it. He goes sulky. He mutters that it's his skill and his mortal, and he can do as he likes. And Hikari Hime says cold. He is not yours. No one is yours. That is the entire thing you've never understood. Then she turns to me, and her voice gentles, and she says the thing I'll carry. You have used the most powerful gift in his catalog to sell soup, save a drowning man against his own will, and carry a hunted people to a home no one can take. Every other holder we have watched used a fraction of that power to conquer. You used all of it to care for people. She looks at Ama no Takumi. That is why the other gods laugh at you. Not because the skill went to a weakling, because it went to the one man alive who understood what it was for, and you were too vain to see it. I don't have anything to say to a goddess naming out loud the thing I've been too embarrassed to name for myself. I bow, it's all I've got. And then the god does the thing that curdles the whole trip, and I think he does it partly out of spite and partly because it's true. He leans forward off his throne, and for once he's not smug, I'd almost call it uneasy. Since you've earned the light woman's favor, he says sourly, here's a gift you won't thank me for. A prophecy. Disaster is coming to your little company soon. A great one, the kind that swallows everything you've built when it comes. And here his voice loses its petulance entirely. Use ship summoning, all of it. Don't be clever. Don't be brave, be a coward the way you're so good at. Do you understand? I ask him, what disaster? What, where, when? Anything. He waves a hand, irritable, evasive, and I realize he doesn't fully know or won't fully say. And Hikari Hime says the thing that turns my stomach cold. It cannot be changed, mortal. What is coming comes. He can warn you of the shape of it. He cannot move it aside, and neither can I. We see the weather. We do not command the sea. She looks at me with something like pity. Prepare. That is all a warning is for. The pool goes dark. I'm left kneeling on cold stone with 100 platinum, a family of people I've somehow accumulated, an island of elves who depend on my ship, and a god's promise that all of it has a disaster coming that no one can stop. only survive. It ruins the festival for me for about a day. Then I do the thing I do with every fear, which is turn it into a to-do list. Prepare. Use every ship. Be a coward. Don't be brave and file it, and go find my friends. Because a warning you can't act on yet is just a weight, and weights are lighter shared. The rest of the vacation, mercifully, is the best thing that's happened to me since I drowned. And it also makes me obscenely rich in that order of importance. 2 of Higanbana's people, Yuzuha, the silent scout, and Shizuru, the one who reads everyone, pick up a taming skill during the festival. Of all places, there's a Beastmaster's shrine and a trial, and they both pass it. And now Higanbana has 2 tamers where it had none. They're itching to use it. And there's a dungeon near the cathedral that everyone talks about, the Howling Wind Cave, a slime warren, good low-risk hunting for a party that wants to blood new taming skills. Higanbana invites me along. I don't fight. Everyone knows I don't fight. But I go because there's a thing about the Howling Wind Cave that made Koyori's ears prick up when she heard it. And it's the whole reason I let a vacation turn into a dungeon crawl. The cave has a flooded section. Deep down past the slime warren, the tunnels drop into water, a flooded gallery no one's ever properly explored. Because you can't take a torch through swimming water, and you can't fight what lives down there while you're drowning. And every party that's tried to raft it has lost the raft to whatever's below. It's exactly the kind of place that's off limits to everyone in the world. Except a man with a boat that can't be sunk, can't be capsized, keeps a dry deck against any hostile force, and won't let anything board it. I summon the skiff, the little lacquered one, small enough to portage down through the dry galleries with the party's help, and we launch it into the flooded section. And I run it through water no one has ever crossed. Things come up at us out of the dark, and they hit the barrier and they lose. Yuzuha holds a lantern and Chizuru reads the walls, and Higanbana rides my untouchable little boat through a drowned tunnel toward a chamber no living person has entered. And in that chamber, in the silt of a flooded cave that only my boat could reach, Yuzuha and Sumire find the bones. It's a dragon. An old one, mythical, the kind the priests argue never existed, and here's the proof, drowned in a cave for who knows how long. Most of it's crumbled to nothing, but 3 things survive intact, because dragon stuff apparently doesn't rot the way bone does. A single scale, big as a shield, iridescent, a claw, black and unbroken, longer than my forearm, and a tooth, curved and white, the length of a dagger, scale, claw, and tooth of a mythical dragon. Items that appear on no market in the world, because no one has ever had one to sell, because the dragons are legend and the legends are drowned in caves no one can reach. I know, kneeling in the silt in a dry boat in a flooded tunnel, that I'm looking at more money than the pepper, maybe more money than everything I've earned put together. Koyori, when she sees them, makes a sound I've never heard her make, the fox mask cracking clean off her face, and she says, very quietly, Naoya, do you understand what these are worth? And I say 500 platinum. And she doesn't laugh this time. She says maybe more. To the right buyers and the right fight between the right nations, maybe more. There's a comic disaster woven through all of this that I have to include, because it's the thing everyone actually remembers about that festival. To sell relics like these properly, to reach the buyers who'd pay dragon prices, you need the guild's highest introductions. And that means getting an audience with the cardinal himself, who controls who gets presented to the great houses and nations gathered at the festival. And the guild's vice master, the man who has to make that introduction, has a magnificent mustache. Enormous, his whole identity. And it turns out the cardinal, an ascetic old man with strong opinions, will not grant audience to anyone with facial hair, considers it a vanity, an old religious rule nobody remembers the reason for. So the vice master of the merchant guild, a proud and powerful man, has to shave his mustache to get us in front of the cardinal to sell the dragon relics. He agonizes over it for a full day. He asks if there's another way, there isn't, and he does it, finally, and comes to the audience clean-shaven and devastated, touching his bare lip every few seconds like a man who's lost a limb. And Hibari laughs so hard she has to leave the room, and even Shiori's mouth twitches, and I have to bite my cheek bloody to keep a straight face in front of a cardinal. The vice master never forgives any of us. He also never stops touching his lip. It's the funniest thing I see in my whole first year, and it happens in the middle of the richest deal of my life, which feels about right for how my life goes. We leave the festival with 3 dragon relics in the stasis locker, a god's warning in my chest, 2 new tamers in Higanbana, and this is the part I didn't expect, the thing Hikari Heim said, lodged somewhere permanent. You used all of it to care for people. I've spent a year embarrassed about my skill. Garbage tier, the coward who can't fight, who wins with tricks, who cooks. And a goddess looked down through a pool and told me I was the only holder in memory who understood what the power was for. I don't know what to do with that. I'm not a hero. I flinch at rabbits, but I keep turning it over on the sail back. And I think maybe the reason the skill went to me, whim or not, is that a skill that can only protect and carry and cross safely, a skill that can't hurt anyone, was always going to be garbage, in the hands of a conqueror, and a masterpiece in the hands of a coward, who just wanted everyone to have a good meal and a safe place to sleep. I don't say any of that out loud. Hibari would gag. But I think it at the rail, with the relics worth a fortune sitting in a locker outside of time, and a disaster coming that no god can stop. Koyori's already planning the sale, 1 relic to be gifted to the cathedral, she says, for the prestige and the cardinal's favor, and the other 2 auctioned to the nations. And she's talking numbers that would clear my 500 platinum in a single stroke, that would put the white ship and the rice within actual reach for the first time. I let her talk. It's the sweetest sound in the world. a fox counting my money. And under it, quiet, is the god's voice. Disaster is coming to your little company. Use ship summoning. All of it. Be a coward. I don't know what's coming. But I've got 2 new dragon relics, 100 plus platinum about to become several hundred, 3 ships and a skill that levels every time I buy a 4th. And a growing suspicion that whatever the disaster is, the answer's going to be the same answer it's always been. Sit inside the wall nothing can cross, and don't come out. The dragon relics sell for 200 platinum, and half of it is mine. And I spend a week being richer than I ever imagined, and it changes almost nothing about who I am. Which I think is the point. Koyori runs the sale like a general runs a battle. The scale we gift to the cathedral free, publicly, with the cardinal presiding, and it's the smartest 100 platinum thing I never actually pay. Because the gift buys the cathedral's blessing on the sale of the other 2, which turns a couple of curiosities into holy relics, from a drowned dragon recovered by devout adventurers. And suddenly, the great houses aren't bidding on bone, they're bidding on legend and prestige and one-upmanship. The claw and the tooth go to auction, and it becomes a diplomatic incident, which is exactly what Koyori engineered. 3 nations want them. Not because a dragon claw is useful, it's not. It's a relic. But because none of them can bear for a rival to have the only dragon relics in the world. It's the pepper lesson at continental scale. The value isn't in the thing, it's in who else wants it and can't have it. The bidding turns into a proxy war between crowns, ambassadors sending riders back and forth, and the price climbs to a place that makes even the auctioneer nervous. And when the hammer falls, the claw and tooth have gone to 2 different kingdoms deliberately split, Koyori's touch, so both walk away having won, and neither can gloat for 200 platinum together. After the cathedral's cut for hosting and the guild's fees, and Koyori's percentage, and the tariffs, my share is 100 platinum on the nose in a single stroke. I sit with the ledger that night and I do the arithmetic that's been my prayer for a year, and the number has changed shape. 100 odd banked from pepper and ferrying, 100 from the relics. I'm past 200 platinum. 200 out of 500. For the first time since the god showed me a bowl of rice in a pool, the white ship isn't a horizon that never gets closer. It's a thing I can see the shape of. 2 more good years or 1 more insane one, and I buy it. And I cook rice on the deck of a ship full of home. I should feel triumphant. Mostly I feel the god's warning, sitting under the triumph like a stone under still water. Disaster is coming. Use every ship. You don't get 100 platinum in a stroke in a world that's been telling you a storm's coming, and get to enjoy it clean. So I do what I do with fear. I turn it into preparation. I put a chunk of the relic money straight back into the fleet, and this is where the loop I've been running for a year finally starts pointing somewhere sharper than more cargo. I've been thinking ever since the cathedral about use ship summoning. All of it. The god didn't say hide, he said use everything, and a fleet is only as strong as the number and kind of ships in it, the skill levels when I buy them, and each new class unlocks new capacity. So I go shopping with intent for the first time buying ships. Not for what they carry, but for what they are. I buy speed. There's a shipwrights yard in the north that makes cutters long, lean maniscrew racers, the fastest hulls on the coast built for message running and revenue chasing. I buy 3, and they're called the Hayabusa class, Peregrine. And on the water, they do a genuinely frightening speed. The yardmaster swears 210 kilometers an hour flat out on the maniscrews. Faster than anything with a sail could dream of, and unlike anything with a sail, they don't care about wind. 3 cutters that can't be sunk, can't be rammed, can't be boarded, moving at 200 kilometers an hour. I don't fully know what I'll do with them. The god said use everything. I'm buying everything. And each purchase chimes the skill up. Somewhere in the buying spree I cross into a new rank, and the menus start offering things I haven't seen before. Ship, summoning rank C. New capacity. Fleet holdings expanded. Crew and tariff assignment unlocked assigned crews, and set toll cargo terms per vessel remotely. Landing ticket system unlocked. Issue and revoke boarding permissions for large groups. Ticket holders may be moved between registered vessels. That last part stops me cold when I read it properly. Landing tickets and moving ticket holders between my own ships. Boarding permission. But scaled, instead of granting 1 person aboard the way I let Doi onto the skiff, I can issue tickets, hundreds of them, and revoke them at will. Grant 500 people permission to be on my deck. Cancel 1 person's ticket and the barrier flings that one off while everyone else stays. And more than that, anyone holding my ticket, I can shift from one registered hull to another, the way I've always shifted cargo in and out of the stasis locker, except now it works on people, not just meat and pepper and relics. I sit with that for a long time, because a barrier that keeps people out is a fortress. But a barrier where I decide person by person who's allowed aboard and who gets thrown into the sea, and where I can move my ticket holders between my boats in an instant, that's not a fortress. That's a weapon. The only kind of weapon a coward who can't fight could ever wield. And it works on people who thought they were my guests. I don't have a use for it yet. I file it with everything else the god told me to prepare. But I feel the shape of the disaster getting a little clearer, feel that whatever's coming, the answer's going to involve deciding who's allowed on my deck, and being able to move the people I've led aboard faster than anyone can stop me. Then, before the storm, there's one good evening, and I'm going to describe it because I earned it, and because everything after it is hard. We gather on the floating resort, the bath raft, grown now into a proper thing moored off the island in the south, expanded with the relic money into a real platform. The gazebo, the wooden bath fed by the hot spring, a galley I built to actual specifications, decking wide enough to dine 40. The whole strange family comes Hibari and Shiori, back from the elf island with news that the settlement's thriving. The second garden's in. The goats have kids. Koyori, who stopped pretending she's only here for the cut. Higanbana, all 6 of them, Ayame and Shizuru, and Chiki Nanami, and Bottomless Kagari, and Silent Yuzuha and Sumire, the cook priestess who's decided I'm a religious experience. Tamamo, riding on a cushion I've mounted on a chair now, lord of its own domain. Kuroto even sends word from the island, a carved token of thanks, the dark elf memory keeping its accounts. And I cook. Not scraps this time. I've got money now and access, and I've been hoarding good ingredients in the stasis locker for exactly this, the best fish. Spices from the southern run, the sweet things that cost too much. I cook for 2 hours and I serve everyone I care about in this entire world, at one long table over black water where nothing can reach us. And Hibari cooks alongside me, and it's not a competition anymore. It's 2 people who love the same thing making it together. And she's actually gotten good, genuinely good, and I tell her so, and she pretends she doesn't care and glows for an hour. Kagari eats 11 servings. Yuzuha falls asleep against Chizuru's shoulder. Nanami and Hibari get into the pair wine and start a singing contest that neither wins. Ayame sits at the end of the table with her sword off her back for once, actually resting, and she catches my eye and lifts her cup just slightly, and I understand it. Look what you built. And I do look. And I let myself feel the whole arc of it for the length of 1 cup of wine. Well over a year ago, I was face down in a harbor. Then I was a soaked coward on a beach with a rowboat, clubbing rabbits with a stick from behind a wall, laughing and crying because it was so stupid and it worked. I had 10 copper of borrowed silver and a skill the gods called garbage. And now a fleet, a family, an island of freed people, 200 platinum, an A-rank party that loves me over soup. A slime on a throne of its own. I didn't do it with a sword. I never threw a punch. I never will. I did it by being a coward with a good boat and a better stockpot. And it worked. And there are 12 people and a slime at my table who'd all be worse off if I'd drowned proper that night in Yokohama. I don't cry. I want to. Shiori catches me not crying, and doesn't say anything, just refills my cup, and that's the kindest thing anyone does all night. Then Ayame's face changes. A rider's come. Not to the resort that's unreachable, but a signal from the mainland, relayed by a fast boat, and one of Higanbana's mainland contacts has sent word, and Ayame reads it, and the resting goes out of her, and the sword hand comes back, and the whole table quiets. Because we've all learned to read her. Higanbana is from Minato Misaki, she tells us. Their home port, a coastal city on the northern reaches. The place they came up from, where their families and their guild house are. And Minato Misaki is being blockaded. The Empire, the big one. The expansionist human power to the north that I've heard of only as a distant weather front on the political map, has moved a fleet into the approaches and cut the port off. A siege by sea. The city can't be resupplied, can't trade, can't do anything but sit and starve while the Empire's ships sit in the harbor throat and wait. And the local lord, a Marquis Sakaki, doesn't have the naval strength to break a blockade of that size. They'll starve it out, Chizuru says, flat, reading the message over Ayame's shoulder. Or the walls fall. Either way, in a few months, Minato Misaki belongs to the Empire, and everyone we know there is dead or a subject. The table's gone completely silent. Kagari stopped eating, which I've never seen. Ayame folds the message and looks at me down the length of the table where a minute ago we were toasting what I'd built, and she doesn't ask. Ayame Todoroki would never ask a friend to walk into a war. She just looks at me, and I understand that Higanbana is going, that they're going home to fight a siege they can't win, that they'll die on their own walls because it's their home and that's what you do. And I think about a god leaning off a throne, uneasy for the first time, saying, disaster is coming to your little company. A great one. The kind that swallows everything you've built. When it comes, use ship summoning. All of it. Don't be brave. Be a coward. Here it is. Not a monster. Not a storm. An empire. A fleet. A blockade. The one kind of disaster that doesn't care how unsinkable my boats are. Because you don't sink a war, you win it. And I have never in my life won anything by fighting. But the god didn't say fight. He said use everything. Be a coward. And I've just spent the relic money on 3 cutters that do 200 kilometers an hour and can't be touched. And unlocked a system that lets me decide, person by person, who's allowed on my deck, and who gets flung into the sea, and move my own ticket holders between hulls faster than anyone can grab them. And I've been preparing for exactly this without knowing what it was. I looked down the table at every person I'd be worse off without. At Ayame, who saved me nothing and gave me everything, waiting for me to say I can't, because I'm a coward, because I don't fight, and she'd forgive me for it. I don't fight, I say. My voice comes out steadier than I feel. You all know that. I flinch at rabbits. Nanami huffs a laugh, wet-eyed. But nobody said the man who breaks the blockade has to throw a punch. Ayame goes very still. Tell me about this harbor throat, I say. and reach for the ledger. Chizuru's the one who answers, because Chizuru's the one who sees terrain the way Koyori sees prices. She pulls a knife and scratches Minato Misaki into the resort's decking while everyone leans in. And it's the first time in a year I've watched someone build a map for me instead of a menu. The city sits at the back of a deep bay. She draws a long, sheltered harbor with one narrow entrance, a throat maybe a few hundred meters wide between two headlands. That throat is the whole problem and the whole opportunity. It's why the port's rich, one easy mouth, calm water inside, safe from storms. And it's why the blockade works. The Empire doesn't have to surround the whole bay. It just has to plug the throat. Sit a fleet across that narrow mouth and nothing goes in or out. Nothing lands, nothing sails, nothing eats. How many ships in the blockade, I ask. The message says 40 in the throat and the approaches, Ayame says. Imperial warships. Real ones, ballistae, ram prows, marines, behind them, further north, a supply base and the main fleet, more than 100 hulls all told. This 40 is just the cork. She looks at me. Sakaki has maybe a dozen coastal vessels left, and half of them are fishing boats with a scorpion bolted on. He can't break a cork of 40 Imperial warships. Nobody in the region can. That's why the Empire chose him soft target, rich port, makes an example. 40 warships, 100 more behind them, against a dozen fishing boats and me. Here's the thing though, and I feel it settle into place the way a recipe settles when you finally understand what it's for. The Empire's whole strategy depends on things that don't work on me. A blockade is a wall of ships that sink your ships, and board your ships, and burn your ships. Ram prows, ballistae marines with grapples. Every single weapon of a naval siege is a hostile force, and a hostile force does not function on my deck, and my hulls do not sink, do not break, cannot be boarded. 40 Imperial warships in that throat are 40 walls I can sail straight through. I'm not going to fight your war, I say slowly, working it out loud, because I need them to hear the exact shape of what I will and won't do. I can't. I mean it, put a sword in my hand and I'll drop it and cry. But I don't have to fight it. I have to break the cork. And a cork only works if the ships in it are dangerous. If I can prove to that Imperial fleet that their whole blockade is useless, that they can't stop what's coming and going, no matter what they throw at it, then the blockade stops being a blockade and becomes 40 expensive ships sitting in a harbor mouth doing nothing while their base gets nervous. Koyori's ears have gone forward. She's doing math again, but it's not price math now. It's a different Fox look entirely. The one from the courtroom when Doi couldn't start the boat. You want to humiliate a fleet, she says. I want to make the fleet irrelevant, I say. There's a difference, and it's the whole thing. I lay out my terms then, because if I don't set them now in the safety of my own table, I'll get swept into being a hero and heroes die, and I have a ship full of rice to buy. I say it to Ayame, but I say it loud enough for all of them. 3 conditions. 1, my identity stays secret. Nobody, not Sakaki, not the garrison, not the Empire, not anyone learns that a coward cook with a boat skill is the reason their war fell apart. If they know what I am and how it works, someone eventually figures out how to threaten it, and I have an island of elves and a table of friends and a ship to buy, and I will not paint a target on any of it. I've thought about this since the Count told me fame was double-edged. It's the most important condition. 2, I only defend and withdraw. I don't attack cities, I don't kill fleeing men, I don't chase. If it turns into slaughter, I'm out. I break the blockade. I keep the port fed. I keep your people alive. I don't conquer anyone. 3, and here I have to make myself say it because it's the coward's condition and I refuse to be ashamed of it. The moment it stops working, the moment there's a threat I can't answer from behind my own barrier, I run, and none of you get to call me anything for it. I told a drowning man the boat wouldn't let him die. I'm telling you the same about me. I stay behind the wall. There's a silence. And then Ayame stands up and she does something that undoes me a little. She bows. The full sword oath bow. The one A-rank swordswomen give to lords. And she says, Higanbana accept every condition and swears to keep your secret to the grave. And Naoya, you could have said no. You had 100 reasons and every one of them sitting at this table. Thank you. And Kagari says, mouth full again already, that he's coming to eat Imperial rations, and Nanami says someone has to keep the coward alive so he keeps cooking. And even Chizuru, who trusts no one, gives me the small nod she gave me on the river a year ago. He's not lying, except this time it means I'll follow this one. Hibari's the one who fixes the actual problem. Though the way she always fixes the actual problem, by pointing at the part I'm being soft about. You said you won't attack, she says, tail lashing, arms crossed. Fine, noble, boring, but defend and withdraw doesn't break a cork, boss. 40 ships sitting in a throat aren't attacking you. You'll just sail through them being smug, and they'll sit there being a wall, and the city still starves because you being untouchable doesn't feed anyone. She jabs a finger at Chizuru's scratched up map. You want to break a blockade without fighting? You have to make staying the blockade the thing that hurts them. You have to be so much trouble to keep corking that base up north decides 40 ships in that throat is 40 ships wasted. That's not defense. That's threatening back. She grins, all teeth, fire tiger to the bone. And you're terrible at threatening back. so it's a good thing you bought me. I look at her. I look at the 3 cutters in my head that do 210 kilometers an hour and can't be touched. I look at the Mizuho and the landing ticket system I've got no use for yet, and Shiori's barrier magic that I've never once needed on a boat that's already a barrier. I look at a garbage skill that a goddess said was the most powerful gift in creation, wasted on a coward, which is the exact reason it's about to end a war. Then here's how a coward breaks a cork, I say, and I pull Chizuru's knife toward the map, and everyone leans in over the ruins of the best dinner I ever cooked. The god told me to use everything, so we use everything. Not to sink their fleet, I won't and I can't. To make their fleet pointless. We keep the port fed straight through the blockade, in front of them where they can see it and can't stop it. We move so fast and so untouchably through that throat that every failed grapple and every bounced ballista bolt is a report going back to their base saying, "We can't hold this. Our weapons don't work. We're wasting hulls here." We turned 40 warships into 40 witnesses to their own uselessness. I set the knife down in the middle of the throat, and we do it as a legend nobody can name. A mage in a cloak, something the Empire can be afraid of without ever being able to find, because a fleet can blockade a port. It can't blockade a rumor. Chizuru looks at the knife in the middle of the map, and then at me, and she says the thing that tells me she's already 3 moves ahead. A shadow mage. A shadow mage, I agree, and I hate it, and it's perfect. Nobody's ever going to look for a coward who cooks. They're going to look for a legend, and legends can't be found, because they don't exist. Ayame's watching me with an expression I've only seen on her once before. That first evening on the island over the scrap broth, like she's recalculating me. Like the man who won't fight just turned out to be more dangerous than anyone at the table. And she's the only one who fully sees it yet, and it delights and unsettles her in equal measure. "You're going to end a war," she says quietly, eating dinner behind a wall, "and let a mage that doesn't exist take the blame. I'm going to keep your city fed," I say, "and keep my friends alive and never throw a punch and buy a boat full of rice at the end of it." I look down at the throat scratched into the decking, 40 ships and 100 behind them and a starving city at the back of the bay. The god called this skill garbage because it can't hurt anyone. He never understood that's not the weakness. That's the whole weapon. Behind me, over the black water where nothing can reach us, Tamamo pulses gently on its cushion throne, and Kagari asks if there's any dinner left before we go to war. And Hibari's already sharpening the plan and her knives both, and somewhere far above a bored god has stopped slouching entirely, because his garbage skill and his coward mortal are about to do the most interesting thing he's seen in 1,000 years. And he warned me it was coming, and even he doesn't know how it ends. I don't either. I just know the answer's the same as it's always been, since the beach, since the rabbit. Sit inside the wall, nothing can cross. Decide who's allowed on the deck, and don't come out until the war forgets why it started. The garrison number's 500, so I issue 500 landing tickets. And it turns out to be the single most useful thing the skill has ever done, because 2 weeks into holding the throat, someone else's spies try to walk aboard my fortress. Let me explain the tickets properly, because they become the spine of everything that follows. The Kaijo Maru holds the harbor throat, and Sakaki's soldiers man it as a shooting platform, but a deck that lets anyone aboard is a deck that lets a saboteur aboard, and a fortress full of soldiers is a fortress full of faces nobody's checked twice. So I do it the coward's way, the precise way. I don't grant blanket permission to board. I issue 500 tickets, 1 per garrison soldier, each one a specific permission tied to a specific person, granted by me and revocable by me. If your ticket's good, you cross the barrier like it isn't there. If I cancel your ticket, the barrier remembers you're not welcome, and it flings you off exactly the way it flung the rabbit on the beach, while everyone around you stays untouched. And it doesn't stop at throwing people off the same rank up that gave me the ticket system. Lets me move my ticket holders between my own registered hulls the way I've always shifted cargo people, and not just meat, from one deck to another in a blink. Sakaki thinks it's a courtesy the mage keeping careful count of who's allowed on his fortress. He has no idea it's a weapon with a hair trigger. The neighboring lord's spies find out the hard way. There's a lord whose land's border Sakaki's Chizuru works out the details. She always does, who's decided that if Minato Masaki falls to the Empire, he'd rather it fell to him first, or at least that he'd like to know how the Shadow Mage's impossible fortress actually works, in case he needs to take it later. So he slips a dozen infiltrators into the garrison. Good ones dressed as Sakaki's soldiers, papers in order, drilled in the garrison's routines, indistinguishable from the real thing. They get issued tickets along with everyone else, because I issue tickets to whoever Sakaki's officers present as garrison, and I don't personally know 500 faces. Chizuru catches them, not by their disguises, those are flawless, but by watching. The way she watched me on the river a year ago. She notices a cluster of soldiers who pace the Kaijo Maru's deck measuring things with their eyes, who test the rails, who ask the wrong questions about how the barrier decides what to stop. Men studying a fortress to break it, not to hold it. She flags them to Ayame. Ayame flags them to me, and I don't need a trial or proof or a confrontation, because I'm not a lord with courts. I'm a coward with a skill. I cancel 12 tickets. I do it standing hooded and silent at the Kaijo Maru's stern, and I just withdraw 12 specific permissions. In my head, the way I let Doi aboard the skiff and threw Kuroto back from the rail. And on the deck, 12 men who a heartbeat ago were standing on solid planking are suddenly not welcome aboard, and the barrier that let them cross now refuses to hold them, and it flings all 12 off the deck and into the harbor at once, in a spray of splashes, while 488 real soldiers around them don't so much as stumble. It's the most surgical thing I've ever done. 12 traitors go into the water, and everyone loyal stays dry, and I never touched a soul, never said a word, never left my spot at the stern. The garrison watches it happen, and the story that spreads is the Shadow Mage knows who is false and casts them into the sea with a thought, which is somehow both a lie and the exact truth. Sakaki fishes the infiltrators out and questions them and learns about the neighboring lord's ambitions. And the neighboring lord, exposed, backs off entirely because you do not move against a man whose fortress simply knows your spies and drowns them. 12 traitors, no blood, no fight. I sit in the cutter afterward and my hands don't even shake this time, and I realize that's the thing that should frighten me, that I'm getting used to it. Hibari notices too. You didn't cry, she says, and it's not a compliment, and I know it. And I make a note to be careful about which parts of this I let become easy. While the Kaijo Maru holds the throat, I run the second ferry, and it becomes the strangest weapon in the whole war, because it's not a weapon at all. It's a resort. The Tensei Maru is the sister ferry to the Kaijo Maru, another big broad passenger hull, and where the Kaijo Maru sits immovable in the throat, the Tensei Maru runs. It carries supplies in through the blockade, refugees and cargo out. A floating lifeline the Imperial fleet cannot stop or board or sink, and on the return legs empty of cargo with a besieged city's worth of frightened, exhausted people crammed aboard. I do the only thing I know how to do for frightened people. I turn it into home. I've got the relic money and a stasis locker full of good ingredients, and, more than that, I've got the God's Shop teas burning in my chest, the promise of rice and films and everything from my world, and I can't have that yet. But I can build a shadow of it out of what this world offers, plus a coward's ingenuity. So the Tensei Maru gets a galley that feeds hundreds. Hibari and I cooking in shifts, hot proper meals for refugees who've been eating siege rations for weeks. It gets the bath, the wooden soaking tub fed by heated water. Tamamo purifies clean, because I learned on the resort island that a hot bath is a religious experience to people who've never had one, and to people who've been under siege, it's a resurrection. It gets a cinema of sorts. I can't get films from home yet, but Sumire the priestess turns out to have a light magic trick for projecting images, and we run shadow plays and painted glass stories on a sheet in the dark. And children who've spent weeks listening to their parents whisper about starving sit wide-eyed watching stories for the first time in their lives. It gets massage chairs. I had a carpenter build them from a description, mechanical wooden things that need your back, and they're crude, and they're wonderful, and there's always a queue. Toy machines for the children, cranked contraptions that dispense little carved prizes. And for me, for the crew, a private stash of instant ramen, the closest thing to home this world can approximate, dried noodle bricks. Hibari and I developed after months of trying, and every time I eat one I think about the God's Shop and the real thing waiting at 500 platinum. The Tensei Maru becomes a legend of its own, separate from the Shadow Mage's terror. Refugees who cross on it come off changed, fed, bathed, rested, having watched a story and eaten a hot meal, and slept safe on a deck no weapon can touch. Word spreads through the whole region. There's a ship in the war where no one starves, no one drowns, no one is afraid. 2 ferries, sister hulls. 1 an immovable fortress that drowns traitors, 1 a floating home that heals the frightened. Both untouchable, both mine. Koyuri, watching me build a spa in the middle of a naval siege, gives me the fox look and says, you know, you could just carry more grain and less bath. And I say, the grain keeps them alive, the bath keeps them people. You feed a starving man and he survives. You let him sit in a hot bath and watch a story and eat a good bowl of noodles. And he remembers he's a person worth surviving for. She doesn't argue, she just adds it to the private ledger where she's been recalculating me for a year, and I think she moves me up a rank again. Then the Empire sends its ace, and the whole siege turns on a single spell that shatters against a wall the gods made. His name is Ryoma Shizukateke, and Chizuru's had the name in the Imperial chatter for weeks, and now he's here, brought forward specifically to break the Shadow Mage's impossible fortress, because the Empire cannot lose face to a legend, and 40 ships in a throat is an embarrassment that's spreading. Ryoma has a unique skill, the kind that only one person in a generation is born with, called piercing light. Chizuru's intelligence is grim and specific. It fires a lance of concentrated light that punches through stone, not chips it, punches through it. Fortress walls, castle keeps, the thick masonry that's supposed to be unbreakable, Ryoma's piercing light cracks them like eggshells. He's the Empire's siege breaker, the answer to any wall, the man they send when a fortification has to fall. And he takes one look at the Kaijo Maru holding the throat a wooden ferry, not even stone, just planks, and he must think it's the easiest wall he's ever been sent to break. He fires at dawn from an Imperial warship that's pushed as close to the throat as it dares. I'm aboard the Kaijo Maru hooded, at the stern, and I see it come a lance of white light, so bright it hurts, screaming across the water at my fortress full of 500 of Sakaki's soldiers. And for one cold second standing there, I don't know if the barrier holds, because I've never faced a unique skill. Ballista, bolts, rams, grapples, fire, those are ordinary hostile force, and the barrier eats ordinary hostile force. But a skill that cracks stone, a once-a-generation power, A thing the gods themselves might respect, I don't know. The piercing light hits the barrier, and it shatters. Not the barrier, the light. Ryoma's world-breaking lance strikes the invisible wall a hand's width off the Kaijo Maru's hull, and it stops dead and blows apart, scattering into harmless sparks that rain down into the harbor. And the ferry's planking isn't scratched, isn't scorched, isn't touched, and 500 soldiers standing on a deck that just took a hit that cracks castle walls don't feel so much as a tremor. I find out later, from the god himself in one of his gloating asides, exactly why. The barrier's boarding ban and the no hostile force rule aren't ordinary magic that a stronger magic can overpower. They're divine, written by Ama no Takumi's own hand into the skill, and a thing written by a god can only be broken by a god. Ryoma Shizugatake has the strongest wall-breaking skill any mortal has ever been born with, and it means exactly nothing, because he is not a god, and my wall is not a wall. It's a rule of creation that a bored deity spitefully filed under garbage. Ryoma fires again and again. He empties himself against the Kaijo Maru, I learn later. A unique skill that powerful drains its holder terribly, and he burns through his whole reserve trying to crack a wooden ferry, and every lance shatters, and the ferry sits there holding the throat, unscratched, while 500 soldiers loose volley after volley from a deck no counterattack can reach, and pick apart the Imperial ship that carried the Empire's greatest siege breaker, close enough to fail. The city watches the Empire's ace, the man who breaks any wall, break himself against a wooden boat and a shadow, and that more than the night raid, more than the drowned traitors, is the moment the siege of Minato Misaki ends in everything but name, because the Empire's whole theory of the war was, we have the strongest weapons, and strong weapons break walls, and broken walls mean fallen cities. And the Shadow Mage just proved in front of 40 ships and 100 behind them, that his walls don't break, not to the fleet's weapons, not to the greatest unique skill in the Empire, not to anything a mortal can bring. Ryoma's warship withdraws, hold and burning, its ace spent and staggered, and the Imperial line in the throat for the first time doesn't re-anchor tight. It loosens. Ships start drifting back toward the base up north. Unordered because you cannot maintain a blockade your emperor's greatest weapon just failed to break, and every hour the fleet sits in that throat is another hour of the whole continent, hearing that the Empire couldn't take a wooden ferry. I take the hood off that night in the cutter, and this time Hibari doesn't have to make me tea, because this time my hands aren't shaking and I sit with that, with the fact that I watched the strongest attack I've ever seen shatter against my wall, and felt only relief and not terror, and I make myself remember Ryoma. A man, the Empire's ace, sure its instrument of conquest, but a man who was born with a terrible gift and pointed at cities, and who just failed publicly, catastrophically, at the one thing that was supposed to make him worth something. I don't feel sorry for the Empire, but I feel something for Ryoma Shizugatake. The way you feel for a blade that's only good for one thing and just found out that one thing doesn't work anymore. Chizuru, who reads everyone, is the one who says it. Quiet, over the cutter's little table. A man like that, a weapon that just broke against you, he won't forget it. Skills like piercing light are the whole of a man's worth in a place like the Empire. You didn't just beat him, you made him useless, in front of everyone. She looks at me. Useless men do desperate things. If the Empire falls and it's falling, a man with a broken pride and a wall-breaking skill and nowhere to belong is exactly the kind of loose blade that turns up later, sold to the worst buyer, aimed at the one thing that humiliated him. I file it, I don't know. She's describing the man who's going to break my arm on a rock in a few months. Right now, Ryoma's just a withdrawn warship and a spent legend, and my siege is won, and the Tensei Maru is full of children watching shadow plays and eating hot noodles, and the Kaijo Maru holds a throat that no mortal weapon can break. I do the arithmetic. 200 platinum banked, 120 from the fortress rental accruing, every cutter run adding fees, the refugee ferry paying its way. I'm past 300 and climbing toward 4. The white ship is close now, close enough that I let myself, for 1 minute in the dark cabin with a slime in my lap. Imagine standing in its galley cooking real rice for the first time in a year and a half. But the war isn't over. Not really. The blockade's breaking. But the Empire doesn't kneel to a loosened line and a spent ace. Chizuru says the Imperial chatter's gone quiet in the way that means someone important is coming to salvage the whole disaster, someone who can't be shamed by a shadow, someone with the authority to demand rather than besiege. She hears his rank before his name. A prince. The second prince of the kingdom the Empire's trying to expand into. No, Chizuru corrects herself, reading it again in the flickering lantern light. Not the enemy's prince. Ours. The second prince of Yashiro, the kingdom Minato Misaki belongs to, coming not to thank the Shadow Mage who saved his city, coming to conscript him. And Ayame goes very still when she hears it, because the way a prince conscripts a mage he can't find is by taking hold of someone the mage cares about. And Ayame Todoroki is the one face in this whole war. The Shadow Mage is publicly known to speak through. The garrison numbers 500, so I issue 500 landing tickets, and it turns out to be the single most useful thing the skill has ever done, because 2 weeks into holding the throat, someone else's spies try to walk aboard my fortress. Let me explain the tickets properly, because they become the spine of everything that follows. The Kaijo Maru holds the harbor throat, and Sakaki's soldiers man it as a shooting platform, but a deck that lets anyone aboard is a deck that lets a saboteur aboard, and a fortress full of soldiers is a fortress full of faces nobody's checked twice. So I do it the coward's way, the precise way, I don't grant blanket permission to board. I issue 500 tickets, one per garrison soldier, each one a specific permission tied to a specific person, granted by me and revocable by me. If your ticket's good, you cross the barrier like it isn't there. If I cancel your ticket, the barrier remembers you're not welcome, and it flings you off exactly the way it flung the rabbit on the beach, while everyone around you stays untouched. And the same rank up that gave me the tickets gave me something quieter I don't have a use for yet, the power to move a ticket holder from one of my registered hulls to another, the way I've always shifted cargo through the stasis locker. Except now it works on people, not just meat and pepper and relics. Sakaki thinks it's a courtesy the mage keeping careful count of who's allowed on his fortress. He has no idea it's a weapon with a hair trigger. The neighboring lord's spies find out the hard way. There's a lord whose lands border Sakaki's. Chizuru works out the details. She always does, who's decided that if Minato Misaki falls to the Empire, he'd rather it fell to him first. Or at least that he'd like to know how the Shadow Mage's impossible fortress actually works, in case he needs to take it later. So he slips a dozen infiltrators into the garrison. Good ones dressed as Sakaki's soldiers, papers in order, drilled in the garrison's routines indistinguishable from the real thing. They get issued tickets along with everyone else, because I issue tickets to whoever Sakaki's officers present as garrison, and I don't personally know 500 faces. Chizuru catches them, not by their disguises, those are flawless, but by watching, the way she watched me on the river a year ago. She notices a cluster of soldiers who pace the Kaijo Maru's deck measuring things with their eyes, who test the rails, who ask the wrong questions about how the barrier decides what to stop, men studying a fortress to break it, not to hold it. She flags them to Ayame, Ayame flags them to me, and I don't need a trial or proof or a confrontation. Because I'm not a lord with courts, I'm a coward with a skill. I cancel 12 tickets. I do it standing hooded and silent at the Kaijo Maru's stern, and I just withdraw 12 specific permissions. In my head, the way I let Doi aboard the skiff and threw Kuroto back from the rail. And on the deck, 12 men who a heartbeat ago were standing on solid planking are suddenly not welcome aboard, and the barrier that let them cross now refuses to hold them, and it flings all 12 off the deck and into the harbor at once, in a spray of splashes, while 488 real soldiers around them don't so much as stumble. It's the most surgical thing I've ever done. 12 traitors go into the water and everyone loyal stays dry, and I never touched a soul, never said a word, never left my spot at the stern. The garrison watches it happen, and the story that spreads is the Shadow Mage knows who is false and casts them into the sea with a thought, which is somehow both a lie and the exact truth. Sakaki fishes the infiltrators out and questions them and learns about the neighboring lord's ambitions, and the neighboring lord, exposed, backs off entirely, because you do not move against a man whose fortress simply knows your spies and drowns them. 12 traitors. No blood. No fight. I sit in the cutter afterward and my hands don't even shake this time, and I realize that's the thing that should frighten me, that I'm getting used to it. Hibari notices too. You didn't cry, she says, and it's not a compliment, and I know it. And I make a note to be careful about which parts of this I let become easy. While the Kaijo Maru holds the throat, I run the second ferry, and it becomes the strangest weapon in the whole war, because it's not a weapon at all. It's a resort. The Tensei Maru is the sister ferry to the Kaijo Maru, another big broad passenger hull, and where the Kaijo Maru sits immovable in the throat, the Tensei Maru runs. It carries supplies in through the blockade. Refugees and cargo out, a floating lifeline the Imperial fleet cannot stop or board or sink. And on the return legs, empty of cargo, with a besieged city's worth of frightened, exhausted people crammed aboard, I do the only thing I know how to do for frightened people. I turn it into home. I've got the relic money and a stasis locker full of good ingredients, and, more than that, I've got the God's Shop teas burning in my chest, the promise of rice and films and everything from my world. And I can't have that yet, but I can build a shadow of it out of what this world offers plus a coward's ingenuity. So the Tensei Maru gets a galley that feeds hundreds. Hibari and I cooking in shifts, hot proper meals for refugees who've been eating siege rations for weeks. It gets the bath, the wooden soaking tub fed by heated water. Tamamo purifies clean, because I learned on the resort island that a hot bath is a religious experience to people who've never had one, and to people who've been under siege, it's a resurrection. It gets a cinema of sorts. I can't get films from home yet. But Sumire the priestess turns out to have a light magic trick for projecting images, and we run shadow plays and painted glass stories on a sheet in the dark, and children who've spent weeks listening to their parents whisper about starving sit wide-eyed watching stories for the first time in their lives. It gets massage chairs. I had a carpenter build them from a description, mechanical wooden things that need your back, and they're crude, and they're wonderful, and there's always a queue. Toy machines for the children, cranked contraptions that dispense little carved prizes, and, for me, for the crew, a private stash of instant ramen, the closest thing to home this world can approximate, dried noodle bricks Hibari and I developed after months of trying, and every time I eat one I think about the God's Shop and the real thing waiting at 500 platinum. The Tensei Maru becomes a legend of its own, separate from the Shadow Mage's terror. Refugees who cross on it come off, changed, fed, bathed, rested, having watched a story and eaten a hot meal and slept safe on a deck no weapon can touch. Word spreads through the whole region. There's a ship in the war where no one starves, no one drowns, no one is afraid. 2 ferries, sister hulls, one an immovable fortress that drowns traitors, one a floating home that heals the frightened. Both untouchable, both mine. Koyori, watching me build a spa in the middle of a naval siege, gives me the fox look and says, "You know you could just carry more grain and less bath." And I say the grain keeps them alive, the bath keeps them people. You feed a starving man and he survives. You let him sit in a hot bath and watch a story and eat a good bowl of noodles, and he remembers he's a person worth surviving for. She doesn't argue. She just adds it to the private ledger where she's been recalculating me for a year, and I think she moves me up a rank again. Then the Empire sends its ace, and the whole siege turns on a single spell that shatters against a wall the gods made. His name is Ryoma Shizugatake, and Chizuru's had the name in the imperial chatter for weeks, and now he's here, brought forward specifically to break the Shadow Mage's impossible fortress, because the Empire cannot lose face to a legend, and 40 ships in a throat is an embarrassment that's spreading. Ryoma has a unique skill, the kind that only one person in a generation is born with, called piercing light. Chizuru's intelligence is grim and specific. It fires a lance of concentrated light that punches through stone. Not chips it, punches through it. Fortress walls, castle keeps, the thick masonry that's supposed to be unbreakable, Ryoma's piercing light cracks them like eggshells. He's the Empire's siege breaker, the answer to any wall, the man they send when a fortification has to fall. And he takes one look at the Kaijo Maru, holding the throat a wooden ferry, not even stone, just planks, and he must think it's the easiest wall he's ever been sent to break. He fires at dawn, from an Imperial warship that's pushed as close to the throat as it dares. I'm aboard the Kaijo Maru, hooded at the stern, and I see it come a lance of white light, so bright it hurts, screaming across the water at my fortress full of 500 of Sakaki's soldiers. And for one cold second standing there, I don't know if the barrier holds, because I've never faced a unique skill. Ballista bolts, rams, grapples, fire. Those are ordinary hostile force, and the barrier eats ordinary hostile force. But a skill that cracks stone, a once-a-generation power, a thing the gods themselves might respect. I don't know. The piercing light hits the barrier, and it shatters. Not the barrier, the light. Ryoma's world-breaking lance strikes the invisible wall, a hand's width off the Kaijo Maru's hull, and it stops dead and blows apart, scattering into harmless sparks that rain down into the harbor. And the ferry's planking isn't scratched, isn't scorched, isn't touched, and 500 soldiers standing on a deck that just took a hit, that cracks castle walls don't feel so much as a tremor. I find out later from the god himself in one of his gloating asides exactly why the barrier's boarding ban and the no hostile force rule aren't ordinary magic that a stronger magic can overpower. They're divine, written by Amano Takumi's own hand into the skill. And a thing written by a god can only be broken by a god. Ryoma Shizugatake has the strongest wall-breaking skill any mortal has ever been born with, and it means exactly nothing, because he is not a god, and my wall is not a wall. It's a rule of creation that a bored deity spitefully filed under garbage. Ryoma fires again and again. He empties himself against the Kaijo Maru. I learn later a unique skill that powerful drains its holder terribly, and he burns through his whole reserve trying to crack a wooden ferry, and every lance shatters. And the ferry sits there holding the throat unscratched, while 500 soldiers loose volley after volley from a deck no counterattack can reach and pick apart the Imperial ship that carried the Empire's greatest siegebreaker, close enough to fail. The city watches the Empire's ace, the man who breaks any wall, break himself against a wooden boat in a shadow. And that, more than the night raid, more than the drowned traitors, is the moment the siege of Minato Misaki ends in everything but name. Because the Empire's whole theory of the war was, we have the strongest weapons, and strong weapons break walls, and broken walls mean fallen cities. And the Shadow Mage just proved in front of 40 ships and 100 behind them that his walls don't break. Not to the fleet's weapons, not to the greatest unique skill in the Empire, not to anything a mortal can bring. Ryoma's warship withdraws, hold and burning, its ace spent and staggered. And the Imperial line in the throat, for the first time, doesn't re-anchor tight. It loosens. Ships start drifting back toward the base up north. Unordered, because you cannot maintain a blockade your emperor's greatest weapon just failed to break, and every hour the fleet sits in that throat is another hour of the whole continent hearing that the Empire couldn't take a wooden ferry. I take the hood off that night in the cutter, and this time Hibari doesn't have to make me tea, because this time my hands aren't shaking, and I sit with that. With the fact that I watched the strongest attack I've ever seen shatter against my wall, and felt only relief and not terror, and I make myself remember Ryoma. A man. The Empire's ace, sure, its instrument of conquest, but a man who was born with a terrible gift and pointed at cities, and who just failed, publicly, catastrophically, at the one thing that was supposed to make him worth something. I don't feel sorry for the Empire, but I feel something for Ryoma Shizugatake. The way you feel for a blade that's only good for one thing, and just found out that one thing doesn't work anymore. Chizuru, who reads everyone, is the one who says it. Quiet. Over the cutter's little table. A man like that, a weapon that just broke against you, he won't forget it. Skills like piercing light are the whole of a man's worth in a place like the Empire. You didn't just beat him, you made him useless in front of everyone. She looks at me. Useless men do desperate things. If the Empire falls, and it's falling, a man with a broken pride and a wall-breaking skill and nowhere to belong is exactly the kind of loose blade that turns up later, sold to the worst buyer, aimed at the one thing that humiliated him. I file it. I don't know. She's describing the man who's going to break my arm on a rock in a few months. Right now, Ryoma's just a withdrawn warship and a spent legend, and my siege is won, and the Tensei Maru is full of children watching shadow plays and eating hot noodles, and the Kaijo Maru holds a throat that no mortal weapon can break. I do the arithmetic. 200 platinum banked, 120 from the fortress rental accruing, every cutter run adding fees. The refugee ferry paying its way. I'm past 300 and climbing toward 4. The white ship is close now, close enough that I let myself. For 1 minute in the dark cabin with a slime in my lap, imagine standing in its galley cooking real rice for the first time in a year and a half. But the war isn't over. Not really. The blockade's breaking, but the Empire doesn't kneel to a loosened line and a spent ace. Chizuru says the Imperial chatter's gone quiet in the way that means someone important is coming to salvage the whole disaster. Someone who can't be shamed by a shadow. Someone with the authority to demand rather than besiege. She hears his rank before his name. A prince. The second prince of the kingdom the Empire's trying to expand into. No. Chizuru corrects herself, reading it again in the flickering lantern light. Not the enemy's prince. Ours. The second prince of Yashiro, the kingdom Minato Misaki belongs to. Coming not to thank the shadow mage who saved his city. Coming to conscript him. And Ayame goes very still when she hears it, because the way a prince conscripts a mage he can't find is by taking hold of someone the mage cares about. And Ayame Todoroki is the one face in this whole war the shadow mage is publicly known to speak through. Prince Yasunori of Yashiro arrives to save the city his own shadow mage already saved, and the first thing he does is try to take Ayame hostage, which tells you everything about princes. He comes overland with a retinue and a warrant, and the absolute confidence of a second son who's decided that breaking the imperial siege wasn't the shadow mage's gift to Yashiro, it was Yashiro's property, discovered on Yashiro's soil, and therefore his to command. A mage who can wreck an imperial fleet without casting a visible spell isn't a hero to a man like Yasunori. He's a weapon lying in the road, and Yasunori intends to pick it up. The problem from his side is that nobody can find the shadow mage. He works unseen. He speaks to no one but the A-rank swordswoman Ayame Todoroki. So Yasunori does the thing. Chizuru predicted the moment we heard his rank. He has Ayame brought before him politely, an invitation, with soldiers on both sides of it, and he makes the offer that isn't one. Bring the shadow mage to swear service to the crown of Yashiro, or Higanbana's leader will find that a party of common adventurers has no rights a prince is obliged to respect during wartime. He doesn't say hostage. He says guest. Everyone in the room understands the translation. Ayame sends word to me through Chizuru, and it's 4 words. He has me. Run. She means it. She'd let herself rot in a prince's custody before she'd let him get his hands on me and my secret. That's the kind of person Ayame is, and it's exactly why I can't do what she's telling me to do. And here's the thing I have to confess, because it's the truest thing about me, and I've never once pretended otherwise. My entire body screams to run. This is a prince, a crown, standing armies, dungeons, executioners, the whole apparatus of a state aimed at me. I broke an empire's fleet by sitting behind a wall and never leaving it, but a prince with a hostage isn't a fleet. You can't sail a cutter through a warrant, and the barrier that stops a ballista bolt does absolutely nothing against a man who holds someone you love in a stone room, a mile inland where no ship can go. Every instinct I've had since the beach says summon a boat, take my people, sail past the horizon, and let Yashiro keep its war. I could do it tonight. I could be gone by dawn, I say, as much in the cutter. Hood off, hands shaking worse than the night raid. We run. We take everyone who'll come. We go. We find another sea. I can't fight a prince. I flinch at rabbits. Hibari. I can't. You can't run, Hibari says. Flat tail still. He has Ayame. You run, she pays for it. Forever. She lets that sit. Then she does the thing she was born to do. The thing I bought her for without knowing it. The thing she's been threatening to teach me since the auction block. So you don't run, and you don't fight, because you can't. You do the third thing. She leans across the little table, all fire tiger. You threaten back. I can't threaten a prince. You can't, Hibari agrees, and grins. And it's the most dangerous grin I've ever seen on her. But the shadow mage can, and I can, in his name. You're the softest man alive, boss, so let me hold the pen. The plan Hibari builds, and it is entirely Hibari's. I want that on record. I could never have done it. I'd have apologized my way into a dungeon as an act of pure, magnificent aggression. And it works because it's aimed at exactly the thing a proud second prince cannot survive. Looking weak in front of the city he came to conquer the credit for saving. First, the letter. Hibari writes it in the Shadow Mage's name, in a hand meant to be read aloud to a court, and it is insulting. Not crude worse than crude, it's contemptuous. It informs His Highness that the Shadow Mage broke an imperial fleet as a personal favor to friends, that he serves no crown and never will, that a prince who threatens a common swordswoman to extort a mage is a coward wearing a coward's crown, and that if Ayame Todoroki is not released by a certain hour, the Shadow Mage will withdraw his protection from Minato Misaki, entirely remove the fortress in the throat, recall the ferries, and let the Empire's fleet, which is loosened but not gone, come back in and finish what the prince by his stupidity invited. It is a letter designed to make a proud man furious and afraid at the same time, and Hibari makes me sign it, and I do, handshaking, because she's right. And I hate that she's right. Second, and this is the part that turns a rude letter into a threat with teeth, I blockade the port with my own ship. Yasunori came overland, but his authority, his supply, his ability to hold Minato Misaki and take the Shadow Mage's credit for himself, all of it runs through the harbor. So I take the Kaijo Maru, the immovable fortress that's been holding the throat against the Empire, and I leave it exactly where it is, and I simply stop letting Yashiro's ships past it. The same wall that kept the Empire out now keeps the prince's own supply and reinforcement out, and there is not one single thing Yasunori can do about it, because it's a wooden ferry that just shrugged off the Empire's greatest wall-breaking skill. He controls the land the city sits on. I control whether anything reaches it by sea. And a besieged city under a prince who can't feed it is a prince who's about to have a very angry city. Third, the rumors. And this is Chizuru's contribution, because Chizuru understands that a mind under pressure believes whatever it's most afraid of. Higanbana quietly, through their contacts, half of it invented seeds the story through the city, and the court that the Empire, having failed to break the Shadow Mage, has moved to buy him. That Imperial envoys have already made contact. That the Shadow Mage, insulted by a Yashiro prince holding his friend, might simply take the Empire's coin and turn his impossible fleet the other way. It's not true. But Yasunori doesn't know it's not true, and it feeds on his own guilt. He threatened the mage first, so of course the mage might defect. That's what he'd do, and it turns his hostage from a lever into a liability. Every hour he holds Ayame. The more real the rumor feels, the more likely he's about to hand the most terrifying weapon on the continent to the enemy he came to fight. It breaks him in 4 days, and it breaks him completely. By the third day, Yasunori's position is a nightmare of his own making. The city he came to save from the Empire is now cut off by sea by the very mage who saved it, and the people know exactly why, because a hooded figure's insulting letter got read in enough taverns, and they blame the prince, not the mage, because the mage fed them and bathed their children, and the prince took their savior's friend hostage the moment he arrived. His own garrison is uneasy. Sakaki, the Marquis, sides quietly with the Shadow Mage who saved his city over the prince who's endangering it, and lets his displeasure be felt. The Imperial fleet, loosened in the throat, sits just close enough that the threat in the letter "I'll withdraw and let them back in" is credible enough to keep Yasunori awake. And the rumor that the Empire is buying the mage grows every hour he refuses to release Ayame. Cornered, his sea cut off, his city turning on him, his hostage becoming the reason he might lose everything. Yasunori does the thing a proud man does when he's lost but can't admit it. He tries to escape the trap quietly. He arranges to slip out of Minato Misaki by night by sea in a fast boat, to get back to solid Yashiro territory, where he can spin the whole disaster as someone else's failure, and hold Ayame somewhere I can't cut off. He should have known better than to try the sea against a man whose entire war was the sea. The Tensei Maru, the resort ferry, the one full of refugees and bathhouses and shadow plays, has a searchlight. I had it built for running the blockade at night, a great mana lamp for finding channels in the dark, and it throws a beam across half the harbor. And on the fourth night, when Yasunori's escape boat slips out from a side quay toward the throat, hoping to sneak past the Kaijo Maru in the dark, the Tensei Maru's searchlight finds him, catches the prince's boat dead in a pillar of white light, in the middle of the harbor, in front of the walls, in front of the garrison, in front of the whole city that's been standing on the ramparts every night hoping to see the Shadow Mage's ships. Everyone sees the second prince of Yashiro, caught fleeing his own besieged city by night like a thief, pinned in a beam of light he can't escape because the throat's blocked by a fortress he can't pass. And then I let him choose. Chizuru had already gotten word to him, through a leak, that Ayame was to be released or the mage would let the Empire back in, but also quietly, that a prince who released her and dealt honestly might still keep the mage's protection and go home a savior instead of a fool. A door left open, a coward's mercy. I never once wanted to destroy Yasunori. I wanted him to let Ayame go, and I built a trap so total that his only way out of it was to do exactly that, publicly, on his knees. Because that's the price. Chizuru made sure he understood it. Ayame released, unharmed, and a public accounting, in front of the city, so that no version of the story can ever be spun where the prince won. Yasunori, pinned in the light, with no sea and no city and no lie left, surrenders. His boat comes back to the pier under the searchlight. Ayame is released, walks free onto the quay unharmed, and Chizuru's there to catch her, and the two of them look up into the light where the Shadow Mage's ferry sits, and Ayame's face does the thing it did on the island. The recalculation, except now it's aimed at a man she can't see who just brought a prince to heal to get her back. And Prince Yasunori, second son of the crown of Yashiro, kneels on the pier, both knees, in front of the entire city that lines the walls to watch, in front of his own soldiers and Sakaki's, in front of a hooded figure on a ferry who never says a word. He puts both hands flat on the boards and he knocks his forehead against the pier, the deepest obeisance a man of his rank can make, the one reserved for begging a superior's pardon, and he holds it there, forehead to the wood, while the city watches the prince who threatened their savior grovel in the light of the savior's own ship. I watch it from the Tensei Maru's deck, hooded, silent, and my hands are shaking again, because this is the most frightening thing I have ever done. Not the fleet, not Ryoma's light. This, a coward standing over a kneeling prince he could have run from, and Hibari's beside me, and she squeezes my arm once, hard, and says under her breath, "That's how you threaten back." And I have to look at a groveling prince through eyes that are absolutely not dry. The war ends the next week, and I end it the coward's way, eating ramen, unable to watch. Because Yasunori kneeling changes everything. A prince humbled but not destroyed becomes, if you're careful, a prince who owes you, and Yashiro is not the only kingdom the empire's expansion threatens. Ayame, freed, and furious and effective, and Koyori, who's been building this the whole time. Broker it, 3 kingdoms, all of them frightened of the Empire, all of them having heard that the Shadow Mage's fleet broke a blockade and shattered the Empire's greatest ace. Agree to combine their forces for a single decisive strike at the Imperial supply base up north, the base that's been feeding the whole overreaching campaign. And they need one thing to make it possible, one thing no ordinary fleet can provide, a way to land an army on a fortified Imperial base without losing half of it to the crossing and the shore defenses. I have exactly that thing. The Kaijo Maru, the immovable fortress, turns out to also be the perfect landing craft, because it can't be sunk, can't be boarded, can't be struck, and it's a ferry, built to hold crowds. I clear the garrison's tickets and issue fresh ones to the Beast Kingdom troops, and 5,600 soldiers of the Beast Kingdom, Yashiro's ally, ride in relays inside the Kaijo Maru, every one of them, a landing ticket, granted and revocable, and I sail it straight at the Imperial base, through the base's own harbor defenses, which loose everything they have at it, and watch it all fall harmlessly into the sea. It grounds at the enemy pier, an unkillable wooden fortress full of fresh troops, and disgorges an army onto a base that thought its harbor was safe. And with the base's defenders committed to that impossibility, the combined fleets of 3 kingdoms come in behind and shatter the Imperial main fleet, which never expected to fight a war at its own front door. The Empire's campaign collapses in a single day, and I watch none of it. That's the part I need you to understand about who I am. At the end of the war I won. When the fighting starts, the real fighting, ships burning, men dying, the base falling, I go below, into the Tensei Maru's little cabin, and I make a bowl of ramen, the instant kind Hibari and I developed, and I put on one of Sumire's shadow plays projected on the wall, and I eat, and I watch a children's story about a fox and a moon, because I cannot look at the battle. I can't. I broke an empire, and I did it by carrying an army in a boat that can't be hurt, and I never threw a punch. And when the punches finally landed, I hid below deck and ate noodles and cried a little at a puppet show, because I'm a coward, all the way down. And it is the exact reason I won. Hibari finds me afterward, doesn't mock me. She sits down and takes half the ramen and watches the rest of the puppet show. And after a while she says, "You know they're calling the Shadow Mage the man who beat the Empire?" And I say, "The Shadow Mage isn't real." And she says, "No, he's not." And we finish the noodles. I do the arithmetic that night because it's still the only prayer I know, and the number has finally actually arrived within reach. 120 platinum from the Kaijo Maru's siege rental, paid in full. The 3 kingdoms, grateful past measure, pay the Shadow Mage's fleet a war fee that Koyori negotiates with the ruthlessness of a fox who's waited a year for exactly this. Enough that when it clears, added to the pepper and the relics and the ferry runs and the ferrying fees, I am, for the first time since a board god showed me a bowl of rice in a temple pool, past 400 platinum. Close to 5, the white ship, the shop full of home, the rice, it's there. One more reach. But there's a shadow in it, and Chizuru names it before I sleep, because Chizuru always sees the terrain.
"You won," she says.
The empire's finished. But an empire falling doesn't just vanish. It sheds its people, its aces, its weapons, its broken men, thrown loose with nowhere to belong and nothing to sell but the terrible thing they can do. She looks at me. Ryoma Shizugatake's skill just failed against you in front of the world. His empire's gone. A man like that doesn't retire. He gets sold to whoever's cruel enough to point him at the thing that humiliated him. She lets it sit. You beat everyone who came at you across water, but your barrier stops what comes at your deck. It doesn't open gates and it doesn't reach onto the shore. Someday someone's going to figure that out, and they're going to make sure the fight happens where your wall can't follow. I file it. I'm 400 platinum rich, and I've beaten an empire, and a prince knelt on a pier for me, and a fox-eared woman just told me, gently, that there's exactly one place I can lose, and it's dry land, and there's exactly one man loose in the world with a reason to drag me there. I don't know yet about the 400 dark elves in the kingdom of Jingai. I don't know that someday is a few months off, or that the man who drags me onto that shore will be Ryoma, or that the arm he breaks will be the one I'm using to shield Shiori. Right now I just eat the last of the ramen, and I dream about a white ship full of rice, and for one night I let myself believe the hardest part is behind me. The Southern Guild Master asks me straight out if I'm the Shadow Mage, and I lie to his face, and he lets me. And the reason he lets me is the truest thing anyone's ever said about who I've become. He summons me after the war, not the Vice Master with the ruined mustache, but the Guild Master, the man who runs the whole Southern Merchant Guild, an old operator with eyes like a scale that never stops weighing. The war's over. 3 kingdoms are grateful. An empire's broken, and everyone with sense has noticed that a certain independent trader named Naoya Kurusu happened to be present at every point where the Shadow Mage's fleet appeared, and that the Shadow Mage's ships and Naoya's ships have never once been seen in the same place at the same time. He doesn't accuse me. He just sits me down, pours the good wine, and asks, plainly, "Are you the Shadow Mage?" And I give him the sentence I've been giving everyone for a year and a half. No, I bought a special ship. It can't be sunk or boarded. I rent it out. What people do with it and what stories they tell isn't mine to answer for. He looks at me for a long time. He knows it's a lie. I know he knows. And then he does something that closes a chapter of my life I didn't know was still open. He decides not to care, and he tells me exactly why. and it's the most accurate anyone has ever seen me. I don't believe a word of that, he says, mild. But here's what I've concluded, so you know where we stand. He counts it off. You're kind. Genuinely, you fed a besieged city and bathed its children, and you never killed a man you didn't have to. Which, in a war, is nearly impossible, and you did it. So a man could be forgiven for thinking you're soft. He refills my cup. But I watched a prince kneel on a pier. I watched 12 spies pulled out of the sea. I watched an empire's ace break himself on a wall, and the empire itself fall in a day. And every single time, the man behind it never once raised his voice, never threw a punch, and got exactly what he wanted. He sets the bottle down. So this is what I know about Naoya Kurusu. He's kind, but corner him, threaten what he loves, and he will do terrible things. Calmly, and you will never see the knife. Because there is no knife. Only a wall and a very frightened man who's better at this than anyone alive. And do him a good turn, and he'll repay it tenfold and remember it forever. He raises his cup to me. There is no profit in making you an enemy. There's a great deal in staying your friend. So you bought a special ship. Congratulations on your special ship. Let's never discuss it again. I drink to that. It's the safest I've felt since the beach, not because I'm strong, I'll never be strong, but because the one man who could unravel me looked at the whole picture and decided the smart play was to leave me be. Koyori, waiting outside, reads my face and grins. He gave you the talk, she says. The don't make an enemy talk. Do you understand what that is? That's the guild deciding you're one of the powers now. Not an adventurer, not a traitor, a power. She's delighted. I mostly want to go lie down. Jinzo tests the ship again, because Jinzo always tests the ship, and this time it becomes a running joke that finally pays off. I should have explained Jinzo earlier. He's a C-rank spearman named Jinzo Kurayama, who first turned up back during the ferry days, when someone hired him to test whether my boat could really not be broken. He's not malicious. He's just a big earnest man, with a very strong arm and an inability to leave a puzzle alone. That first time he wound up and hit the hull with everything he had, and the barrier threw the force back so hard that he got launched, and the boat went sailing up into the air a good few meters and came down without a scratch, while Jinzo landed on his backside. He's been coming back ever since, every few months. Wherever I am, Jinzo turns up, says, let me try again. Winds up, hits the boat, gets flung on his backside, and leaves satisfied that it still can't be broken. He never wants anything. He just needs to know the impossible thing is still impossible. He turns up after the war, hears the Shadow Mage stories, and gets a gleam in his eye. They say it beat an empire, he says. Let me try again. And he winds up a bigger man now. Or maybe just angrier at the puzzle, and he hits the Mizuho's hull with a spear thrust that would gut a warhorse. And the barrier throws it back, and the entire 15-berth cruiser lifts clean off the water, hangs in the air for a heartbeat, and slaps back down, dry and whole. Not a splinter out of place. Jinzo sits down hard on the dock, delighted, and says still can't break it, like he's confirmed the sun still rises. I've stopped being annoyed by Jinzo. I've started liking him. A man who hits my boat once a season and never once threatens me or asks for anything is, in my life, a kind of restful constant. I file him, the way I file everyone. I don't know he's going to be one of the people who drags me off a rock while my arm's broken. Right now he's just the man who bounces off my hull and grins about it. Higanbana pays for the last dragon tier thing I'll ever sell them, and asks me to drop the formality, and I nearly cry over a business transaction. There was one dragon relic I never sold, not the scale, claw, or tooth from the cathedral, but something Yuzuha and Chizuru's taming turned up later. A lesser find, but real and marketable. Higanbana wants it for their own reasons. Sumira's cathedral connections, a shrine dedication, I don't fully follow it, and Ayame insists on paying full market. 313 platinum, a number Koyori negotiated and I keep expecting Ayame to flinch at, and she never does. 313 platinum. Most of it went straight back into the fleet on Koyori's insistence. New hulls toward the Jingai line. Tariffs settled. Debts on the war fleet cleared, and what stayed banked pushed me just past 500. I run the arithmetic in the ledger that night, and my hands are steady and my eyes are not, because for the first time the number is past 500. Past it. The white ship, the liner, the shop, the rice, the thing the god dangled in a temple pool a year and a half and a lifetime ago. I can buy it. Right now. Tomorrow. I've made it. But Ayame does something first that matters more than the money. When the deal's signed, she takes off her sword. She does that now. Around me the way she started doing on the island, and she says, Naoya, stop it. The bowing. The Shadow Mage. This, the way you still talk to us like clients. She's not smiling. Ayame's rarely smiling. That's not how her care works. You carried my whole party across a river a year and a half ago and vanished so we wouldn't feel we owed you. You brought Minato Misaki through a siege and let a mage that doesn't exist take the credit. You brought a prince to his knees to get me off a stone floor and then hid below deck because you couldn't watch the fighting. She puts a hand flat on the table, the pier gesture inverted, an equals gesture, drop the formal speech. All of it. You're not our client and you're not our savior. You're ours. Talk to us like it. And I've been a coward my whole life. I've never once been good at being cared for. And a swordswoman just ordered me to stop holding my friends at the polite distance I hold everyone. And I don't have a sentence for it. So I just nod. And Kagari fills the silence by asking if there's dinner. And Nanami throws a bread roll at him, and Hibari says, about time, to no one in particular, and Shiori, quiet in the corner, gives me the small warm look she gives me when I've done something right without meaning to. and the whole strange family of it closes around the moment and carries it off before I can ruin it by crying into a contract. I'm past 500 platinum. I could buy the rice tomorrow. I have friends who just told me to stop pretending I'm alone. And then the tone of my whole life changes, in a single letter, because that's how it always goes with me. Koyori brings it, and she's not doing the fox grin, and that's how I know before she opens her mouth. There's a trade opportunity in the kingdom of Jingai, a human supremacist state to the north. A place I've heard of only as a name that makes Shiori go still. Human supremacist means exactly what it sounds like. In Jingai, non-humans aren't people, and the divine contract that protects debt servants. The god of commerce's binding that says a master cannot use violence, and a servant cannot flee the thing that made Hibari's and Shiori's servitude survivable, Jingai has argued its way out of. In Jingai, non-humans aren't held under the god's contract at all. They're held as state property, and state property is outside divine oversight entirely. The god's mark doesn't burn a Jingai official for beating a slave, because in Jingai's law, the slave isn't a person the contract recognizes. It's a thing the state owns, like a road or a wall. I ask Koyori why she's bringing me a trade opportunity in a slave kingdom. With that face, she tells me. Because among the state property of the kingdom of Jingai counted in a ledger like livestock, outside the god's protection, past the reach of any contract are 400 dark elves. 400. Shiori's clan on the island is 35. The last of one scattered people. 400 is a population, an entire subjugated people. Generations of them, taken and held and worked and bred as property by a kingdom that decided they weren't people. So the gods wouldn't have to notice. Shiori is in the room. I watch it hit her. She spent her whole life running with 35 people, thinking they were nearly all that was left. And Koyori has just told her there are 400 more of her kind alive in chains a few days. Sail north. Her face doesn't break the way it broke on the useless rock. It goes very, very still. The stillness that in Shiori means something is costing her more than she can afford, and she looks at me, and she doesn't ask, because she's Shiori and she'd never ask me to walk into a slave kingdom for her. She doesn't have to, I already know I'm going. But here's the thing that turns my stomach, the thing that's different from everything I've ever solved, and I say it out loud so the whole room hears me understand it. My skill doesn't fix this. I look at the ledger, at the 500 plus platinum, at all the impossible things I've done. The barrier protects the deck, it stops what comes at me. It's kept a whole city fed and broken an empire and thrown a prince on his face. I make myself say the rest. It doesn't open gates. It's never once opened a gate. It can't reach onto shore. It can't unlock a cell. It can't make a kingdom hand over 400 people it's decided it owns. Every problem I've ever beaten, I beat by making the enemy come to me, at my deck, where I'm untouchable. But those 400 aren't at my deck. They're inland in a slave state, behind gates and laws and a whole kingdom that says they're not people. I look at Shiori. I've never faced a problem my boat can't touch. This is one. Chizuru, who reads terrain, says it flat. It's the thing I warned you about. Dry land, the one place you lose. She's not wrong. The one thing that isn't hopeless, and it's a thing I nearly forget, because I've never once used it this way, is that the rank-ups didn't just let me store cargo outside of time. Somewhere in the buying spree before the war, the skills started letting me move my ticket holders between my own registered hulls, the way I've always shifted pepper and relics through the stasis locker people. Not just meat, from one deck to another in a blink, so long as they're mine and the boats are mine. I've never needed it. I file it, the way I file everything, and I don't know yet how much I'm going to need it on a shore where my wall can't reach. And then, Koyori Suzuna, the fox who never does anything without a cut, who once told me she'd help me for free exactly once, and made me swear not to tell anyone. Koyori sits down across from me and does the thing she's best at in the entire world, which is find the price of an impossible thing. You can't open the gates, she agrees. So don't. You've never won a fight in your life. Market breaker. You've won trades every single time. The rabbits, the comb, the pepper, the relics. The whole war you never beat anyone with strength. You beat them by controlling the one thing they couldn't do without, and making them come to you for it. She leans in, and the fox eyes are doing the thing they did over the pepper, over the war fee, the look of a mind finding the lever. So, what does a slave kingdom need? What does any kingdom need that it can't make for itself, that has to come by sea, that right now comes on ships that get robbed by pirates and lost to storms? She spreads her hands. You don't own an army. You own the one shipping line on the continent that cannot be sunk, robbed, or stopped. Jingai is a kingdom. Kingdoms have to eat, and trade, and move goods, or they starve and rot like Minato Misaki did. She taps the table. You don't break down their gates, Naoya. You become the thing their whole economy depends on, and then you close the door. I look at her. I look at Shiori still as stone. I look at a ledger that's finally, after a year and a half, past 500 platinum, the exact number of the white ship. The rice, the shop, the thing I've rowed toward since I drowned. Everything I've wanted is one purchase away. And 400 people are counted as property in a ledger a few days north, outside the reach of every god, and I'm the one man alive whose ship's a slave kingdom can't sink. Hibari, of course, is the one who says the quiet part. She's been through it herself, a servant on an auction block, one bad turn from a mining company that works people to death. She doesn't make it noble. She just says, tail lashing. We're going to do it, so stop looking like you're deciding. You already decided the second Koyori said 400. She's right. So the only question is the coward's question, boss. The one you always ask. She jabs a finger at me. How do you win this one from behind a wall when the wall can't reach where the people are? I don't have the answer yet. For the first time in a long time, I genuinely don't. But I've got a fox who finds levers, a fire tiger who threatens back, an elf whose people I already carried home once, an A-rank party that told me to stop being formal, a guild master who won't make me an enemy, a spearman who bounces off my hull for fun, and a skill aboard god called garbage that has never once let me down, and a problem that my boat for the first time truly cannot solve. So I'll solve it the only way I know how, not with the boat, with the trade. And if that's not enough, if a slave kingdom that's outmaneuvered the gods themselves finds the one place my wall can't follow and drags me onto the shore where I finally actually lose, then I'd better plant every tool I have before I get there. I look up at Koyori and Shizuru and Hibari, and Shiori who hasn't moved, and I say the sentence that starts the last hardest thing I'll ever do. Okay, we break a slave kingdom the way we broke everything else. We make them need us, and then we stop. I break a slave kingdom the way I broke everything else, not with a fleet or an army, but by becoming the thing it can't live without, and then, one morning, refusing to sell it bread. It takes 2 months, and it's the coldest, most patient thing I've ever done, and Koyori runs it like the masterpiece it is. We start by doing exactly what Jingai wants. We trade with it. The Tensei Maru, the resort ferry, now stripped back to a working cargo hull, opens a shipping line to Jingai's main port, and Koyori prices it to win half of what every other carrier charges because we can. Every other ship that runs cargo to Jingai loses one in a handful to pirates, to storms, to the reef runs on the northern approach. Their prices carry that risk baked in. Mine carry no risk at all because my hull can't be sunk, can't be boarded, can't be robbed, so I undercut everyone by half and still make a fortune. And I do it openly, reliably, on schedule, in fair weather, and foul. Within 2 months, no merchant in the region can compete. Why would a Jingai importer pay double for a ship that might not arrive when the Kurusu line arrives every time at half price? The other carriers pull off the route, they can't match me and won't bleed trying. And that's the trap closing. Slow and silent. I've made myself not a supplier to Jingai, but the supplier, the artery, the single line down which a meaningful share of the kingdom's imported grain and goods and salt now flows. A human supremacist kingdom that decided the gods didn't have to notice its slaves has quietly become dependent on one non-fighting coward ships to feed itself. Koyori watches the numbers come in and her ears go flat with something that isn't quite a smile. They think they got a bargain, she says. They think they're using the desperate cheap outsider. They have no idea they've handed a man they'd enslave in a heartbeat the power to starve them. That's the whole thing. That's the pepper lesson and the comb lesson and the Minato Misaki lesson. Scaled to a kingdom, control the one thing they can't do without, and you don't need a single sword. And then, one morning, I close the door. I don't threaten. I don't send an ultimatum with the Shadow Mage's contempt in it. That was Hibari's weapon against a proud prince. And Jingai isn't proud. It's cold. And cold things respond to cold things. I just have Koyori post a notice, plain as a tariff schedule. In every port I serve, the Kurusu line does not serve slave states. Effective immediately, service to the kingdom of Jingai is suspended. No demand attached, no price named, just a line drawn, quietly, in the language of trade. And Jingai's ports go empty. The other carriers are gone. I drove them off the route months ago. The pirates and reefs that made the route deadly for everyone else are still there for everyone else. So when the Kurusu line stops, there is no replacement. Not at any price Jingai can bear. Not fast enough to matter. Warehouses that expected grain get nothing. Prices spike. The merchant class, the ones who actually run a kingdom, whatever the crown pretends, start screaming at the crown, because their livelihoods depend on the artery I just clamped. And the crown discovers, the way Minato Misaki's besiegers discovered, that you cannot fight a shipping line. You can't sink it. You can't board it. You can't force it to sail. You can only come to the table. 2 months to build the dependence. 2 weeks of empty ports to break the will. And then a Jingai envoy comes to negotiate, which is the sentence I've been building toward, because a slave kingdom that once counted 400 dark elves as state property is now, for the first time, willing to sell them to a shipping magnate. It needs more than it needs its principles, in exchange for reopening the line that feeds it. The price for 400 people is 500 platinum, and it is the exact number of the white ship, and I pay it. And the only thing I grieve is the rice. I want to be honest about the moment, because it's the truest thing about who I've turned out to be. I have, after the war and the relics, and the last of Higanbana's payment, a little past 700 platinum banked enough, finally, after a year and a half of rowing toward it to buy the liner and more. The shop, the rice, the soy sauce, the ramen, the films, home in a galley, the thing a bored god dangled in a temple pool, and the thing that has been the horizon of my entire second life. Jingai's price for the 400 is 500 platinum. It's not an accident. Koyori's certain, the envoy priced it to hurt, to make the outsider bleed for his sentiment, to extract the maximum a man who'd go to this length would pay. And it is, precisely, the white ship's whole price, gouged out of the middle of what I've saved. I pay it without hesitating. I don't even do the arithmetic out loud, because there's nothing to weigh 400 people against a bowl of rice. Isn't a calculation. It's not even a choice. It's just a thing I do. I sign it, and 500 platinum the liner's exact price. The thing I rode toward for a year and a half goes across the table, and I'm poorer than I want to be again, and 400 dark elves who were state property in a ledger are, on paper, mine to carry away. Shiori is there when I sign. She knows exactly what the number means. She's watched me chase it since the southern continent, since she asked me for an island. She knows I've just spent the rice on her people's people. She doesn't thank me, because Shiori's people don't think in words for things this large. They remember, they write it into the memory that keeps their accounts across generations. She just looks at me, and her eyes are wet in a way I've only seen twice, and she says, very quietly, "You bought your home world twice over and gave it away both times. Once for 35, now for 400. And I say the only true thing I have. It was always going to be rice or people, and I was never going to pick the rice." And Hibari nearby, who was on an auction block herself once, has to leave the room, and doesn't insult anyone on the way out. Which is how I know. The only thing I grieve is the rice. I'm ashamed of it, and I let myself feel it anyway. One small human ache under the enormous right thing that I was one purchase away from a bowl of white rice on the deck of my own ship, and the price of it just went to Jingai. And it'll be a while before I can reach for the liner again. I decide that's allowed. You can do the right thing and still miss the rice. Chizuru senses the trap before it springs, because Chizuru always senses the trap, and it's the one thing that saves my life. The handover is where it goes wrong, and it goes wrong exactly where I always knew I could lose, on shore, where the barrier can't reach. Jingai demands the transfer happen on land, the 400 to be delivered to me at a coastal holding yard, not sailed out to my ships. It sounds reasonable. It's the opposite of reasonable. My whole life, my whole impossible run, has depended on making the enemy come to my deck, where I'm untouchable. Jingai has arranged for the one thing that undoes me, a meeting on the shore, where I have to stand on dry ground, off my ships to take possession, and where my wall protects nothing. Chizuru reads it in the terms before we ever land. "They're not selling you 400 slaves," she says, going over the handover conditions with the flat certainty she had about the bandits on the river a lifetime ago. "You broke their kingdom. You humiliated their crown in front of their own merchants. A cold state doesn't forgive that, it repays it. They're selling you a reason to stand on a shore you can't defend, with your friends and your money, and the one man in the world who wants you dead." She's already heard the name in the Jingai chatter the way she heard Ryoma's during the siege, because that's who Jingai bought to close the trap. Ryoma Shizugatake, the Empire's broken ace, bought for a song, the wallbreaker whose piercing light shattered against my barrier in front of the world, sold to the worst buyer, and aimed at the thing that humiliated him, exactly as Chizuru warned me on the cutter months ago. So I plant 3 tools before I ever set foot on that shore, because a coward who's been told he's walking into an ambush does not walk in empty-handed. I plant them quietly, days ahead, and I tell no one but Koyori and Chizuru the full shape of it, because a plan you don't speak can't leak. The first tool, at dawn, days before the handover, I take one of my registered cargo ferries, a big broad hull that can really hold a crowd, and I stash it hidden in a cove down the coast from the holding yard, hull swapped to look like an ordinary abandoned coaster, so it's mine, unsinkable and unboardable, and empty, waiting. It sits there, a derelict to any eye, holding a divine property no eye can see and room enough for 400 souls. The second tool, I keep the whole 400, once they're transferred to my custody, as ticket holders, the landing ticket system, the one that saved the throat at Minato Misaki, 400 permissions granted at once, and the same rank up that let me shift my own ticket holders between my own hulls in a blink, so that the moment they're legally mine I can move them through the barrier as I please. The third tool, I don't come to the shore alone, whatever Jingai's terms say. I come with the account paid in full. The account no one's ever been able to make me pay the goodwill I banked without knowing it. A lifetime of small right things coming due at once. The trap springs the moment the 400 are transferred, and I'm standing on the shore off my ship exactly as Jingai arranged. I take possession the 400 dark elves, gaunt and disbelieving, herded into the holding yard, and, by the letter of the contract, mine, and the instant it's legal, the instant I'm bound to be there in person to receive them. Jingai's soldiers move, and Ryoma Shizugatake steps out of the crowd, and for the first time in this whole world I am in a fight on dry land, where my wall does not reach. I lose. I have to say it plainly, because it's the only fight I've ever lost, and it deserves the truth. Soldiers seize me. I don't fight back. I can't. I flinch at rabbits. I've never once thrown a punch, and when it goes bad and a soldier grabs Shiori, who has run to me instead of to safety, I do the one thing my body knows, which is put myself between her and them, and a soldier breaks my arm doing it. Cleanly, brutally, I hear it before I feel it. I'm on the ground, arm wrong, shielding Shiori with a good one, in the mud of a shore where the untouchable shadow mage is just a coward with a broken arm, and Ryoma stands over me, and for 1 second his whole shattered pride is in his face. The wall breaker finally standing over the wall. That's the moment my 3 planted tools go off all at once, and it's the last trade I ever make with a garbage skill. Tool 2. First, I trigger the ticket warp. The 400 elves are all my registered ticket holders, and I have the cargo ferry stashed in the cove registered as my vessel, and the same skill that lets me shift my own ticket holders between my own hulls fires now 400 people. Mine, moved from one deck to another, the way I've moved 100 grateful faces off a fortress 100 times. In 90 seconds, before Ryoma can do more than raise his hand, 400 dark elves vanish from the holding yard, and reappear aboard the ferry hidden down the coast, out of Jingai's reach, on a broad hull built to hold them, that cannot be sunk or boarded. The thing Jingai spent 500 platinum in an ambush to prevent me leaving, with the 400 happens in a minute and a half, and there's not one thing they can do about it, because you cannot stop a man from moving his own people between his own boats. Tool 3. Second, the account comes due. Because I didn't come to that shore alone. Whatever the term said, I came with a lifetime of banked goodwill, and it arrives now. Jinzo Kurayama, the spearman who bounces off my hull for sport, who I fed and befriended and never once asked anything of, crashes into the shore fight with his terrible strong arm and a war cry, because someone got word to him that his friend was in trouble, and Jinzo does not need a second reason. Kuroto's elves a second line of ships. Kuroto leads now. The young man I let go free instead of keeping, whose people I carried home, whose blood memory records every debt come in off the water, because the dark elf memory said, if he is ever in the worst trouble of his life and we can reach him, we come unasked, and they can reach me, and they come. And Ayame Todoroki, who told me to stop being formal, whose life I bought back from a prince, ends the ambush the way only she can. She comes off a boat onto that shore, and the swordswoman who's been guarding a fleet with nothing to guard against finally has something, and she ends the men holding me in about 3 seconds, and stands over me and Shiori with her blade out and dares Jingai to try again. They drag me off the rock. Broken arm, and all Jinzo carries me half over one shoulder, roaring. Kuroto's people covering the water, Ayame's blade covering the ground, Shiori's hand fisted in my collar, refusing to let go back to a boat, my deck, where the wall closes over us again, and Jingai's whole ambush is left standing on a shore with nothing. No 400, no Shadow Mage, no revenge, just the sea between them and everything they tried to take. I lost the fight. I won the trade. 400 people are free off a slave kingdom's ledger, aboard boats no one can sink, and I'm alive with a broken arm because I planted 3 tools and paid a lifetime's goodwill in a single minute on the worst shore of my life. Tamamo could clean the wound but not set the bone. A broken arm is a broken arm, and I'd carry it in a splint for weeks. Ryoma delivered the only defeat anyone ever handed me on land, and I don't hate him for it, and that turns out to matter. He doesn't come off that shore with Jingai. That's the thing I learn later. When the ambush collapses, when the 400 vanish and the goodwill account arrives, and Jingai's crown has spent everything for nothing. Ryoma Shizugatake stands there a twice broken man, failed against my wall a second time, sold to a slave state that's now lost, belonging nowhere. And a broken blade that's been beaten by kindness twice is a different thing than a broken blade that's only known cruelty. That's for later. Right now there's just the sea and a boat full of 400 people who were property this morning and aren't anymore. The god summons me from a sickbed and I refuse the thing every other mortal in history would have begged for. Hikari hymns there again, and Amano Takumi looks for once almost chastened, because he warned me a disaster was coming, and it came, and I survived it exactly the way he told me to be a coward. Use every ship. Don't be brave, and I did, and it cost me my arm and my rice, and it worked. And he offers grudgingly to make it up to me. A combat skill, real power, at last strength, so that the next time someone drags me onto a shore, I don't lose. I don't get my arm broken. I win. I refuse it, flat. If you give me the power to fight, I tell a god from a sickbed, with my arm in a splint, I'll use it. I'm a coward, but I'm not a saint. Someone will corner me and I'll fight, and I'll die in a week, because a coward with a sword is just a dead coward with extra steps. I won everything I ever won because I can't fight, because the only tool I had was a wall and a stockpot and a fox who finds levers. Don't fix me, I'm not broken. And then I ask for the one thing I actually want. End the Shadow Mage. Retire the legend. I don't want to be a terror anyone hunts. Let it be known there never was a mage, only a man with a special ship. Let me be small again. Hikari Hime looks at Amano Takumi with a face that says he's still teaching you what your gift was for, and the god, Sour, grants it dissolves the Shadow Mage, lets the legend fade into a story about a special ship, and then grudging, unable to leave it at that, he adds one thing more, because a vain god cannot bear to be outgiven by a mortal. You've no money anyway, he mutters, spent the liner's price on elves, and he uncaps the shop. The homeworld shop, the rice and soy sauce and ramen and films no longer locked behind a 500 platinum liner. Just open, available, to a man who spent the liner's price to carry a people home, alone against your obvious future, the god says, looking away. Don't make it weird. It's an apology. The vainest god in creation just apologized, in the only language he has, which is a gift. And then the last thing, the thing that turns the loss into the ending, the people I helped bring the money back. They come to the ship where I'm mending, arm in its splint, one after another, and they pay a debt I never called in. Marquis Sakaki, whose city I fed. Prince Yasunori humbled and better for it, sending the crown's thanks in coin. The Southern Guild closing an account. The 3 kingdoms whose war I ended. Higanbana, all 6 of them, dumping Higanbana's own platinum on the table. Shiori's elder, and now the 400 freed, whatever a freed people can gather. Jinzo, sheepish, with a sack of coin he's been saving, because he wants me to have the biggest boat so he has the biggest thing to fail to break. Koyori grinning with a pudding royalty scheme. I don't fully understand, that's apparently made me rich in a way I never authorized. Enough, more than enough. Enough for the white ship.